across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I don't suppose we are going to have been very surprised by this when we heard that Lloyds Bank were going to defy the attempt to protect women in the Supreme Court. I'm not a great lover of the Supreme Court. I genuinely would abolish it. I think it's caused a lot of problems. Nonetheless, it ruled that women are biological women. A very simple reason, actually. Under the Equality Act, it talks about lots of things related to pregnancy and women's issues, health issues. The government of Scotland argued that there were two types of women in the Equality Act. Simply wasn't the case, and therefore the Supreme Court ruled in their favour. As we know, trans women are not being discriminated against. They're allowed to continue in their employment. They're not forced into keeping as men or as women. They can wear their frocks, wear their makeup, do whatever they want. It's the single-sex spaces where they were abusing women's rights, admittedly accidentally, that this ruling relates to. And for Lloyds Bank immediately to say, we will continue to discriminate against women in this way, I thought was despicable. And by the way, this will flag up on Lloyds Bank media monitoring. I am saying publicly in this show that you have committed to continuing to discriminate against women. That's as far as I'm concerned. The NHS once again has committed to continuing to discriminate against women, operating illegally against the Supreme Court's ruling. I think it's absolutely despicable. Well, look, Ashley, you can comment just in a second, but let's just introduce our two guests. Obviously, really helpful to have Dr. Callum McClatchy Miller, which is not his real name, but nonetheless, he is a broadcaster and a doctor, and he's married to Lois McClatchy Miller, that is your real name, who is a campaigner on all of these issues. Ash, why don't you give your opinion and then perhaps we can
I mean, obviously, like you said, it was discriminating against women, but it was also discrimination against the gay communities because they didn't have anywhere they could meet as a gay man or a lesbian that was safe with their own sex, which is what they want. So it actually was discriminating against them by demanding, you have to let male lesbians in and stuff like that. So... but they had this old court case to decide, what we've always known, that a woman is a woman and a man is a man. The world's gone mad.
So why don't we? So okay, look, we always knew that these people were determined to discriminate against women. Once again, I'm accusing Lloyds Bank of deliberately discriminating against women and the NHS. Hello to all of you misogynists out there, whether you wear a frock or not. Okay, so let's just read this out. Hospitals have been accused of seeking to defy a Supreme Court ruling about trans women, that they're not legally women. Managers and campaigners pledged unwavering commitment to trans people after they suffered pain and concern from the judgment, which will force the NHS to bar trans women, people born biologically male, from female-only wards and toilets. We remind ourselves, of course, Dr. Miller of Heriot-Watt University midwifery course, which warned some of their nurses that when they took the ladies' knickers off, they may find a penis and testicles there amongst pregnant women.
It's quite remarkable. I remember there was one sort of morning handover working in general surgery where we had the CT scan results of someone, and what the CT sort of radiographer said is it was a woman's CT scan, and it said the prostate looks normal. And we all found it hilarious because the radiographer had obviously made a huge mistake. We were like, this is ridiculous, this is very bad reporting. But none of us actually thought, maybe it is a woman with a prostate. It's just utterly ridiculous.
How dangerous is it to begin treating people who are biologically male as females? I mean, one would assume that it would be a catastrophic medical error if suddenly drugs intended for a female were given to me as a man. In cases even where gender doesn't appear on the face of it to be relevant.
Yeah, there was a great example a few years ago. An American influencer went into a Planned Parenthood, the big sort of abortion industry clinics in the US, and he went in as a man and he said, I've taken a pregnancy test, I'm pregnant, and I would like an abortion. And the Planned Parenthood people, being so steeped in the woke sort of crap, were just like, of course, we'll give you an abortion, even though he's clearly a man. And, the drugs they would have used would have been potentially harmful to that man's health. So absolutely, it's a health risk as well as an offence to common sense.
I mean, look, I just want to ask you, Lois, because you obviously look at a number of these issues. When something like that happens with an abortion for somebody who is a biological man, I mean, what do they do? Do they just play along? I mean, is it? No, but like when you were kids, there was always these doctors and nurses, little games and stuff like that. And I mean, do they do that? Do they actually? It's disgusting.
I mean, how far can they really take it, right? I mean,
Not very.
Some point, the ridiculousness of woke ideology just hits the buffers of reality, and you can't go over that. They cannot perform an abortion on a man because a man doesn't have a.
I mean, the
100% success rate.
the irony is, you're probably more keen on men going to abortion clinics than you are women.
Well,
but,
save a lot of lives.
But it's just utterly silly. I worry about this whole thing, and I also worry about the way that it has been presented as an attack on the trans community. I mean, look, Asher and I have said this loads of times. The boxing fraternity. My uncle was a boxing champion. He held the Lonsdale belt in the light welterweight division, which doesn't exist anymore, junior welterweight division, in 1968. The boxing boards of control have never agreed on anything other than women in a men's boxing ring is a recipe for disaster. They hate each other, and yet not one of them would go to the Olympics. Not one of them.
Well, I mean, this is because there's just some things that are so stupidly, blindingly, obviously true that people just cannot, go against them. And if you look at that Supreme Court ruling from last week, it says things not only about a woman is, a biological reality. It says sex is binary and men can't get pregnant. Those are two things that are now.
There was that Arnold
Supreme Court.
Schwarzenegger documentary. Sorry, drama. I'm getting like Keir Starmer, where he was pregnant and gave birth.
Oh, well, the Supreme Court may have not looked at that.
They wouldn't
for
allow
reference.
that now. But it is dangerous, isn't it? For because a man a woman who calls herself a man might need a smear test, but on the record says she's a man, because they literally would just say man. They wouldn't get a smear test, and then they could get cancer, and that actually did happen with men and women with their respective diseases.
The thing is that they don't just say there's a difference between trans women and women. They say trans women are women.
Exactly,
and
and
it's
on the
almost
record,
offensive to call them trans women. So what they're actually pushing for is for us to not even see them as trans women, but to treat them genuinely
So hang on a
as
second.
women,
Would
which
you
is
get
just
into
insane.
trouble? Would you get into trouble as a hospital doctor if you said to a woman in men's clothes, "You need a smear test"?
Potentially. I mean, hopefully not anymore.
We've heard
potentially
examples.
in the past, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's who knows? People, I'm sure, were scared to do all sorts of sensible things before. This
Well, there was that nurse, wasn't it? And hopefully they're going to throw all these cases out now because they won't stand up. Where she refused to call him a she, and it was a paedophile trans person out of prison, wasn't it?
Yes.
And now they'll have to throw all those cases out. But I mean, the thing I've heard is that the ridiculous European Court of Human Rights will overturn this. Have you heard any? I mean, it wouldn't be that shocking though that I would see them doing that, and they're actually above the Supreme.
they're
But
kind
the problem is, I don't believe in the whole rights culture thing. But the problem is, we have elevated certain people, right? And what we were going to end up in a position is that right at the top are trans people who can say and do absolutely anything. I mean, look, let's just remember in football, trans woman, bloke. I can say bloke now, can't I? Some bloke smashed a ball at a woman's leg so hard it shattered her knee. And when other teams in that league did not want to compete against this hard lad, they had to pay fines and compensation to him on the grounds that he was a woman.
There was a girl banned all season. I think she was autistic, and she said that's a man, and she got actually banned for a whole season.
Yeah.
And hopefully now these will all have legal recourse.
Right, because what the Supreme Court judgment said was all of these things that we have been saying for years and been getting into trouble for. Like there's phrases that you could have pulled out from this judgment. If you had said them on Twitter 5 years ago, you'd have lost your account, you'd have lost friends, you might have lost your job. And now we have a Supreme, the highest court of the country, affirming finally that all these things are true. But
hang on a second. Let me just say one thing to you, though. But the highest court in Scotland did not rule that way.
Very true.
And now I appreciate the highest court in Scotland is the Supreme Court in London, which but you know what I'm driving at. which is the Scottish government and the Court of Sessions, is it called, in Scotland, and a large number of organisations in Scotland, plus this Equalities and Human Rights Commission, which is supposed to be enforcing the law but simply isn't. A large number of very significant bodies in Scotland literally were in favour of men, biological men, going into changing rooms of young girls.
That's absolutely right. Thankfully, the SNP government has publicly accepted the ruling.
Really?
Yes.
Can I ask
well,
you?
Jimmy Cranky had to resign all over that. So
Indeed, that's right. Yeah.
Can I ask you this question? Because you're more into this, or more into it. You're not into it.
She's well into fan stuff.
She loves it. Okay, here's my question to you. Have they accepted it because they know they made a catastrophic mistake by being too woke, and now they can blame somebody else and they can just shut up about it?
I think they definitely know they need to walk back on the woke stuff before the election in 2026. They have 12 months at this rate. And the SNP, they are known most of all within the last few years as being the most woke government in the world.
Yes.
We had Nicola Sturgeon, who presided over men going into women's prisons.
And what was she?
What
No,
was
I'm
she?
joking.
Another conversation for another time. But she,
But she did destroy her entire career. And also, they brought in, and I'm sorry to say this, Humza Yousaf, I mean, that speech, big racist.
Yeah, I know.
Wait. They're all wait. Yes, so Scotland.
And where's her? She's got that lovely caravan, the Winnebago. Where's
That's
that
right.
ended up? The SNP.
It's all very, very mysterious.
gone all quiet, hasn't
It's
it?
gone very quiet.
She donated it to, what's his name? From Liverpool.
Her mother.
Derek Hatton.
Oh, yeah.
She donated it to Derek Hatton. He could add it to the horse box.
But,
Some people will get that joke.
She didn't really.
One interesting thing, though, is Humza Yousaf, who was known to be very, very woke. One of the reasons that his government fell apart was because he actually moved to ban puberty blockers for kids and hormone therapies for
Really?
kids, because even Humza Yousaf knew, and it was also to do with green agendas that he wasn't able to fulfill, but even Humza Yousaf knew that this treatment of children, giving them drugs and scalpels when they're born, no child has ever been born in the wrong body. It's cruel to tell them that they are. It's cruel to give them drugs and scalpels to change themselves and to
God.
mutilate their bodies. And even
Irreversibly.
Humza Yousaf knew that, and it cost him his career as well.
So
But I think
that's
that was
quite
a
a good
big
thing,
turning
though.
point.
What
Yeah.
happens? What happens to doctors in the NHS who now willfully go against both medical practice, medical knowledge, and the laws of the land? I mean, presumably there will be doctors now who continue. In the same way as there were illegal abortionists, there will presumably be all sorts of people who will continue to treat trans women as women, and they will be ultimately struck off and criminally prosecuted.
I don't know, honestly, where that will go. I mean, there's different levels of oversight. There's obviously the law, there's the GMC, there's various other bodies. So it's difficult to say. And of course, wokeism is still pretty prominent in medicine. But it's interesting, even being on doctors' forums over the last week, like Lois was saying, 5 years ago, you'd be scared to raise any concerns about any of this at all.
Which
This
is
time-
ridiculous. Doctors should know what sex you are.
Right.
Right.
Somebody's got it. Somebody's got in touch with us, and not an unreasonable point about this whole thing about recognising a sex change from the European Court of Human Rights in 2002. What is important to do, I think, is to remember what you're actually recognising. So, there's first of all, if you've decided to have a sex change, then you cannot be thrown out of your job. You can't be discriminated against. However, you can't go into female-only spaces if you're a man, and you can't go into male-only spaces if you're a woman. That is the sum total of this. It has no further implications than that. But what's happened is the number of women's sports have been destroyed. I mean, I feel sorry for those girls. They have to have their own private ceremony for 4th, 5th and 6th, because they'll be expelled from their university if they admit what's going on.
I think it's part of this wider cultural problem that, just being nice to people and being kind and being virtuous is all about just believing someone and telling them they're right no matter what they do, and making them feel no sort of uncomfortable sort of feelings or anything like that. I mean, we have patients in psychiatry who think they're cats, or who think they're Jesus, or who think they're...
Well, woke, there was a study in Scandinavia. They said woke is mainly made up of people. Well, a lot of it is made up with people who have, mental, like they're depressed or some.
But of course,
transgenderism, quite a lot of it is young women who are autistic, and autism is very connected to masculine sort of cognition. And so if you're a young woman with autism that has more typically masculine kinds of thinking, it's understandable that in this culture they would just be told, well, it's because you're a boy.
But you know, when you talk about, and I remember Oprah Winfrey, but that's your truth. No, there's the truth, and there's not the truth. Yeah. But I mean, if somebody who's a biological male can say that they are a female, why can't I say I'm a cat?
Well, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. In psychiatry, these people say this kind of stuff, and we don't hit them or expel them or cast them out of society or abuse them or anything like that. But we also don't affirm their delusion.
No,
that's what this is about.
That's absolutely right. So ultimately, if you believe you're a cat, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you somebody who's suffering from a mental health problem. But what doesn't happen is we don't start amending your face and sellotaping fur to you.
Right. I think some schools have started.
because actually there's an additional cruelty, because the other thing is about gender dysmorphia. My understanding is that if you get a so-called sex change, it's not clear that when you change sex you won't then pander to be back in the original one. Because if your psychological problem is you believe you're in the wrong gender, when you medically change the gender of the person, which we can debate whether that really happens, but okay, they then go, I want to be a man again, I feel like I'm in the wrong gender. So you say to yourself, well, hang on a second, there are some people, and Dr. Miller I'm sure will know better, but there are people who believe that their arm is alien to them. The medical solution to that is not to amputate the arm.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly, and that's really the long and short of it. But particularly with kids, we know that the large majority of kids who feel like they might be the wrong gender or something like that grow out of it, something like 80%. Yeah. And this isn't new knowledge. We knew this 10 years ago when all of these people, the government, the conservative government, was still pushing all of this mutilation of children. We knew this then.
I've got a friend of mine who starts as a goth, then went to being self-harming and is now trans. Now, there is a lot of medical research, a lot of academic research that says that there are people who are depressed, who are struggling with mental health problems, and we wouldn't want to decry them for that, but they will jump on the latest fad, if you like.
Well, when I was at school, all the girls thought we had anorexia. That was the big kind of social trend of the day, and we thought it because there were so many TV shows about it, telling us that we did, and all these characters on shows had it. So everywhere we looked, we saw anorexia. So of course, everyone started to think, well, maybe
it's like a psychological virus, like what woke is.
Exactly.
Queers for Palestine. They know that they'd be executed in Palestine, but they've got this sort of thing in their mind.
If you're depressed, Asher, and you're looking for something, then you'll find
it's
something.
Like conspiracy theorists are often people with disorders or whatever, because they want an answer to why they're like this. It's not their fault, or it's not their fault anyway, but they think it's something else causing it.
But you know what? Nobody has ever been able to answer me this. Why is a man praised for identifying as a woman, but a white person would be chastised for identifying as a black person?
There was something called trans black a while ago. Yeah, there was. Okay. By the way, thanks to Matt in Hove, who found my Derek Hatton joke funny. Nobody else got it. We're going to continue to talk about this subject. Maybe, you know what, we don't normally take calls this early, but 0344 499 1000 if you've got relatives who you're concerned about, if you personally have experienced women's sports kicking you out because you're not a man, odd situation, and also any of your views on it. We might put some calls through. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. By the way, two absolutely brilliant guest co-hosts to have in on this subject. Even though they're married, they're both experts.
They're like the new Richard and Judy, you know what I mean? It's like the modern version.
We try.
Great. We'll be back in a moment.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, right, I asked for my phone. Right, I mean, in what way? A big red telephone that we use as a prop.
It's not connected.
It's not even plugged into anything. Okay, but this is a special show where we're going to talk a little bit about women's rights. And by the way, I make no apology for the fact that this is two blokes presenting, because I believe that everybody in our society and everybody in our community should be defending women's rights. And if people want to say, oh, well, you know, it's got nothing to do with you, I wholeheartedly disagree.
But we're the only choice, so that's your hard luck.
Yeah, we weren't planning to resign. But I will say one thing. I mean, I used to remember when I worked as a contributor at the BBC, they used to go, Andre, you're brilliant, but do you know anyone who's as good as you who's either woman or black? You know, literally just racially
The thing
discriminating.
is, if you'd have said you're a woman, they still wouldn't have given you the job.
Yeah, you should have just said you.
Yeah, I should have just said. Anyway, so we're still with our guest co-host this evening, who, I said before the break, are married but actually experts in this field in their own right individually. We've got Dr. Callum Miller, who's an NHS doctor and also researcher into medicine,
Medical ethics.
Medical ethics, yeah. And his wife, who is Lois McClatchy Miller, who works for a Christian group a free speech group. Explain.
No, I work for a Christian legal group called ADF International. We defend everybody's right to live and speak the truth. So in the UK, that looks like defending people who've got in trouble for tweeting biological facts about men and women, or protecting children from gender mania and drugs and
Can I just tell you something?
Abortion-praying people.
So I've just got to stop you to say something.
My
phone's in my pocket. Right. Somebody is still searching for it right now. Okay, having told him off for bringing the wrong phone, to be fair, here is the original phone. What I will say to viewers and listeners is there was an argument in the studio between myself and the wall about the fact that there was a chair that wasn't working. So
where was it?
It was in my pocket. In my pocket.
You still should have looked properly and found it.
Yeah, you should have looked in my pocket.
Yeah.
Right. Note to self. But anyway, look. Let's ask about this whole thing on the marathon. How worried should we be about the fact that sports organisations are defying the ruling?
Well, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, there's a range of sporting issues at stake here. You know, we've mentioned already the boxing and the physical safety threat that this poses to women if we're to pretend that women don't have they don't have the biological structures to be able to compete against men.
Well, what they are is, in a sense, they are weaker. Now, I'm nervous about saying that, because I think what you have to remember is that because women and men are different, there are significant strengths that women bring to the table. But being physically strong,
160% more.
I mean, I have to say, based on my mum and dad together, longevity with babies, I think my mum was definitely more physically capable.
Some women can punch.
Yeah,
but Andre, like we joke, but it is true. I mean, women have their own unique strengths.
Yeah, they do.
And they've been completely ignored. Really, for the last 50 years, we've been told to kind of compete against men or compete with men, and to try and adopt male sort of centric lives and male sort of centric strengths, instead of being able to enjoy like our strengths when it comes to motherhood and family, etc. But anyway, going back to the physical element, men have, you know, a better muscle density.
Twitch muscles, doctor, isn't it? It's about the percentage of twitch muscles which are fast-acting. Sprinters have it, and it just means you can have more explosive power.
I'm sure that's part of it, but I'm sure it's also muscle mass. And
muscle mass.
Yeah. There's a number of different dimensions, but in most of those respects, men just are physically stronger.
And reversing testosterone doesn't make them a woman physically, does it?
Men are physically stronger on average. Women are better at giving birth on average, and many other things. These are just basic facts.
But the other point, when they talk about puberty, there is actually one example that I've seen personally where you can prove that going through puberty in a certain ways is going to make a difference, because girls at swimming age 12 would murder your average boy. I should say that's metaphorically rather than literally,
because they're longer at that age. Their spurt of growth is before the male.
And ultimately, if a boy says I am a girl at that stage, he will not beat the females. He just won't. unless he starts taking estrogen. And that whole thing, it's just very, very bad, the whole situation. But what happens with your legal firm's more about free speech, but surely there's going to have to be continually now legal challenges to these organisations like Lloyds Bank, who say we will defy the law in order to continue discriminating against women 3 times now.
Well, they've only ever had a black horse, and proportionately there's only about 27% of black horses in this country.
That's true. Well, the thing is, like, the UK Supreme Court ruling is great, but unless we implement it, it's not going to mean anything on the ground. And so the urgent business that has to take place now is that NHS guidelines, prison guidelines, schools guidelines, sports body guidelines have to now change in respect to what has happened, and that's going to take a lot.
And they're breaking the law if they do it from now on. There's no defence that they didn't understand because it's been clarified by the Supreme. So the marathon people could have a legal case and they'd lose it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out when the marathon takes place, because as we know, it's likely to be that men will do significantly better in the women's category as they would in their own category. We saw that there's the famous case of Riley Gaines in America, and Riley Gaines, the swimmer, she was a competitive swimmer at university level. In America, this is quite a high level.
Yeah, of course.
Like, you know, they are kind of almost professional athletes.
University sports is a professional.
They take it extremely seriously. That's right, and they give up, you know, their whole lives. Really, I mean, every weekend, every school night, they'll be out swimming, and all through their career to get this free education. And Riley Gaines had been at the final of the pinnacle of her career, and she, you know, people gave her criticism because she didn't come first. She came 4th. But in this particularly, you still get a medal for 4th. And she was exactly tied to the millisecond with a male athlete who goes by the name of Leah Thomas. And instead of giving her, because it would look bad for them to discriminate against Leah, or he who calls himself Leah, they gave it to the man instead of her, and she had to stand on the side.
But there must have been they must have been slightly. You can't just.
It was
it was a tie.
It was an incredible situation where they were a true
But the other thing that we ask about Leah Thomas, people go, is a trans woman a woman? But my question about Leah Thomas is he trans? Right, and I'll tell you why. Because all he's done is grown his hair long, and by the way, Axl Rose had long hair, right? But Brian May's got long hair, right?
It was a woman with a penis, is what you're trying to say.
But he basically grew his hair long and called himself Leah, and did nothing else, right? So, I mean, I'll tell you what I'm driving at Dr. Miller. I have some sympathy for people who want to go into women's changing rooms when they've amputated their male genitals, right? Because I think there is a level of intimidatory behaviour if you look physically like a woman that's much better. But I mean, Leah Thomas didn't do anything. It was just a fella in a leotard with some long hair.
I don't know exactly what Leah Thomas did, but I think it. Yeah. I mean, you said at the start this is about women's rights, and of course it is partly a question of women's rights, but more fundamentally, I think this is just a question of what is true and what is not. Even if even if not a single woman was, you know, unfairly done by this phenomenon, we should still reject it because it is fundamentally untrue. And I think, therefore, it's just an offence against truth. It's an offence against common sense more than anything else.
But it's a scientific world that have tried to prove it with their papers, you know, all these sort of pseudo-sciences.
It's complete nonsense, But I think we should stop saying trans woman and trans man.
Just man and woman.
If you're a trans woman, you are a man.
Yeah, but
you're not a trans woman. You're a man.
But hang on a second. People who lived in a regulatory environment like me in this station, and by the way, I don't want to rail against the regulator. You know, it is important that taste and decency is upheld, but, you know, we'd have been in significant trouble 2 weeks ago by saying Leah Thomas is just a bloke, right? We would have been. Now, okay, you know, a lot of this is well-meaning, but you know, when people were going along with it, I mean, you know, her penis and all that sort of thing. I mean, when you saw that couple where they said it's the first trans man to have a baby, and then and female sperm and all this sort of thing, and just thought, you know, you're making a mockery of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cal's right to say that it's not just about women's rights and safety and dignity and privacy. It is about that too. But, you know, I don't care whether they're boxing, they're in a race, or they're playing chess. You know, I don't care if this is about men being stronger necessarily. It's just that men can't go into women's spaces.
I do agree with that.
And there's a really interesting case in Australia. They're about to have their own "What is a Woman" case there, much like ours, but it's quite an incredible one. It's a woman.
Is this the lesbian dating site one?
No, so it's actually a wider. It's called Giggle for girls, and it's actually a wide. It's a little bit like Mumsnet, but for a range of professional women, so they can network. They can do. It's on all sorts of things on this app, but it's just for girls, and it's not because girls are weaker or stronger or better or worse. It's just because it's just for girls.
So women sing, right? They want to hang out together, right?
Sometimes girls hang out, and sometimes guys hang out together, and that's just fine. But a gentleman who calls himself Roxanne Tickle got into the app.
So just to be clear, people are considering listening to Roxanne Tickle.
Indeed. So Roxanne Tickle decided that he would sue...
Tickle versus Giggle is the case.
And it's Tickle versus Giggle, exactly.
Oh,
And so this
he's trolling. I've heard this woman talking, and it's ruined her life for the last 3 or 4 years. And they had this facial recognition technology to detect if you're a man or a woman, and this man keeps trolling her, doesn't he? And you're just going, all right, we're doing this court case, getting backed by various lawyers and groups.
Vexatious litigation.
And
we've met some people who've been personally destroyed. Because the other thing is, I don't want to be rude to people who are autistic, but because a lot of these people are autistic, they become very fixated, and the level of harassment can go boom through the roof.
And the process is the punishment, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also those groups have infinite money for litigation. I mean, litigation isn't just a matter of who's in the right, who's in the wrong. If it was, the world would be a much fairer place. It's often a case of who has the money and the freedom monetarily to risk potentially losing the money. People with common sense often don't, but people who advocate for this ideology are often backed by immensely wealthy billionaires.
It just reminds me, we've got a contributor on this channel who was falsely accused of being a puppy farmer, and the public body that falsely accused him of it in the end said to him, you will either plead guilty or we will seek a custodial sentence. We've got unlimited resources, you're going to prison. But it does happen.
Luckily, there's J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk and very powerful people now on the right side of history, and this is beginning to pivot the whole situation. It's not just that's changing. This will lead to, hopefully, to all the other ridiculous things that are sort of the crazed ideas like net zero and while China are pumping out all the coal-fired power stations, they're also making all the renewable equipment and selling it to us.
Ash, can I ask you a question? I mean,
shoot.
Do you believe, and I'd be interested in that this is just a wider context in terms of an attack on Western society? Because it seems to be...
People are waking up to woke.
The trans people and the Palestinian, the pro-Hamas people, which doesn't seem like an obvious bedfellow. And then there's other people who are pro-China and pro-net zero, and it just feels like there are a group of people who say whatever happens in the West, whatever happens in Christianity is evil.
Hitler was the good guy, Churchill was the evil.
Exactly.
And it's happening in every field, isn't it? Obviously we should be looking after our ex-servicemen before people who've just rocked up on the shores, and that's not everything is in the looking glass, isn't it?
I mean, I think that's really interesting where Hitler was bad but Churchill was worse. What that talks to is, don't worry, supporters of Hitler are dead. What we now need to do is eradicate supporters of Churchill as well. Nobody objectively sits there and goes, the Bengal famine, which, by the way, was caused by the Japanese blockade of Bangladesh and had nothing to do with the Royal Navy, simply because they couldn't get through the blockade. But anyway, nobody says the Bengal famine is compared to the Holocaust. No sensible person believes that. The reason they say this, Lois, is because they think Hitler's people have been defeated already. It's time to defeat Churchill's.
Yeah, well, it's just a very confused world, isn't it? We've just been completely muddled, and I think it comes back to what we were saying earlier about having your truth and my truth, and we can all have this relative idea of what we want to be factual. And as long as you don't offend me and as long as you don't challenge me, we'll get along great. But as soon as you say something,
be kind.
Be kind. But what does kindness really mean? What is compassion? Because I don't think that you really can have kindness or compassion for someone unless you're telling them.
Well, I don't think it's kind for me to say I'm going to lock you up unless you allow me to amputate the genitals of your children. I think that is as far from kind as it's possible to
like
be.
a cult, isn't it? And you know, people used to say, I remember that Vox Pops you showed the other day, and you said, "Can a man be what is a woman?" And a bloke said, "Oh, it can be what they want to be. It's 2022, man," because it was a couple of years old. It's 2022, man. It can be what you want. But that's just a ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense. But they just say things that sound all right.
But then, Dr. Miller. Look, I'm not going to call you Dr. Miller. I'm going to call you Calvin from now on. But I just want to remind the audience of what you are professionally. But actually, when you're talking about taking children away from their parents, amputating their genitals as part of what is largely a research experiment, I'm afraid that is what Joseph Mengele did. That is similar to the Nazis, certainly far more similar to the Nazis than anything that's happened in Britain under the medical ethics that you live by.
I mean, it's crazy that you have one side that is experimenting on children, mutilating them, and doing all sorts of horrendously evil things. Yeah. The other side is just saying,
let's not do that.
Men have penises. And these are the guys who get called Nazis.
Yeah, but if the doctors refuse, say, this is ridiculous, I'm not cutting his bits, he'd get cancelled, so they have to actually force to go along with it in a way.
But they've also got this situation where at schools, they're not going to tell the parents on the basis you're transphobes. I mean, that's coming close to this Justin Trudeau idea, which is if you don't allow us to amputate the genitals of your children, you will be registered as a child abuser.
There's a lot of countries around the world who've passed, conversion therapy. They call it conversion therapy ban. But what they've actually passed is enforced conversion therapy, because conversion to me is telling a child that they are born in their body and they do need to fix their bodies by having operations and taking drugs and chemicals, which is a horrific thing to tell a 7-year-old.
Irreversible as well.
Irreversible damage. It could be sterilizing for life. I mean, what 7-year-old can really tell you, oh, at 30 years old, I don't want children?
No, it's ridiculous.
And why are they pushing it on them? It's really sinister.
Kids don't know what they want for breakfast.
It's evil, man.
If a kid said, "Oh, I want to have ice cream for breakfast every day, Mummy," you'd say, "That's not going to happen, dear." But suddenly, if they say, "Oh, I want to be a boy and take drugs and chemicals, and one day, cut my genitals off," you have to say, "Oh, that's a good idea."
Yeah, but I got told that the reason a lot of parents go along with it now is because the trans lobby has said on these forums, where nice little parents go on, they say, "Your child will commit suicide if you do not go along with this," which, I mean, would strike fear into the heart of any right-thinking parent, because it's not true, is it?
No. Yeah, and the numbers of detransitioners are rising. That's especially women, but also men who have gone through this phase in their teens where they thought they wanted to do this, took life-altering decisions, and then when they hit their early 20s, realised that they have made a mistake, and that adults who should have been giving them good advice have let them make the biggest mistake of their lives.
Are they going to sue? I mean, they must be furious, because it's
there is litigation starting.
Kira Bell took a case, and that was one of the women who stood up again. She is a detransitioner, and she was told that she was
born. But you can't reverse it. You are normally sterile after it as well.
It can be. It depends how far you went on puberty blockers, how young you started.
Well, if you've chopped things off and altered things.
That typically happens a little bit older. But
you can't unbreak your voice as well. If a man has to have an operation to make it.
I've got a friend who's had that. Yeah. And also bear in mind, they take a file to your Adam's apple, and a mistake with that, and you've got real problems. And it's got nothing to do with your voice. It can slit your throat and all sorts. Horrendous.
Yeah. And we shouldn't, it's great to have the Supreme Court ruling, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels now with all this stuff, because, a couple of years ago...
They're already plotting, we know that.
Yeah, and all the institutions this stuff is running rife. A couple of years ago, the WHO appointed a panel of experts on gender care that were to write guidelines around the world.
Experts.
And the majority of them were transgender identifying activists who obviously had skin in the game and were promoting stuff online about child transition. Some of them said that a child should be able to choose their gender at any age and have
because they wouldn't get on in their careers if they didn't. The ones that are speaking against get cancelled or, not promoted. That's what
There was one professor from a really top university in America who said that even before birth, the baby begins to have a sense of their gender identity. And so these are the people who support abortion at this point.
And we've all got nipples.
This is not a baby.
That's why we all have nipples,
This is a clump of cells that has no feelings, that nevertheless knows their gender identity.
It's remarkable that all of that hypocrisy, isn't it? Where you do, you say, you're right. I've heard other examples of this. So a baby is already thinking about its gender identity at the point when you're allowed to abort it for not being a baby.
Right.
Right. And so what if, you know, is there a case where someone finds out that their baby is transgender and then they abort it, and is that against their human rights as a transgender baby? You know, there's so many mind games that you can play with the priorities of rights that people have in this game. Obviously, that's just not how human rights can work.
See, I've got to be honest with you. I'm increasingly of the view that we should ban abortion. I'll tell you why. Just because we've got a population crisis. You know, forget my own personal views on it, which I am anti-abortion. But I also think, you know, there is an argument at what point a clump of cells becomes conscious. But the whole idea that you would want to abort a child that you know is now considering its gender identity. I mean, I don't think it is, by the way. But all right, we're going to stick with this. At which point's total confusion. Let's just leave it there, and we'll be back in a moment talking about another thing that you're going to be appalled by: 16-year-olds allowed to be euthanised. More next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, so lots of people are queuing to see Pope Francis, God rest his soul.
Yeah, can they move away from the door?
They're queuing to see him at the Vatican. Obviously, the casket's open and people are taking selfies with him. Well, not with him. So look, my own view is this, which might be a little controversial. I think it is in poor taste, but honestly, I believe his soul has departed his body, and therefore all we're doing is being, we just don't want to destroy something that God created, i.e. the dead body of the Pope. And if it makes you happy, makes you happy. I don't know, what do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but then are they posting these selfies on the internet? Like,
yeah, probably.
A dead body?
Yeah, but the Vatican took photos of him in the open casket, and it is going to be on TV.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't know. I mean, you're right that the soul has departed from the body. So then, kind of, why would you want to take a picture with him if it's not really?
Well,
is
it kind of to say I went?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then it's a terrorist.
Do people do that with Lenin? Because his body's embalmed for like his ear fell off once.
Lenin, I've been to Lenin's tomb in Red Square. Yeah. They very strictly prohibit photography, and those blokes there, yeah. I don't think they'd have a laugh with you. But then again, I mean, when my mum died, and obviously it was during COVID. The casket wasn't open, the coffin wasn't open, but she was in, God bless her, or rather her body was in obviously a storage unit for quite some time, simply because of COVID. We had problems organising funerals and whatever. In the end, we just brought her home. She was there for a couple of weeks.
Really?
Yeah, Mum was in the lounge. And at the end of the day, what was it? It was the dead body of my mother. Yeah. Right? So it wasn't spooky or weird. People are going, God, it must have been strange. Although, to be fair, my dad's house has a couple of lounges. Right. So it's the kind of, we weren't there watching the telly, which would have been, I think, disrespectful. I just think... yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Callum?
I think, you know, it is a bit disrespectful. Maybe it's partly a culture clash, but there's also worse things. And I wonder, I mean, the Pope obviously had certain problems with the way he phrased things vaguely sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, he wasn't perfect, but at the same time, my honest sense of how he would respond is like...
To laugh.
to laugh and to say, you know, I hope when they came to Rome or when they came to church, they managed to see Jesus a bit better.
Well, it's exactly the same as when it was exactly the same as what Asher said. I'm sure it was you that said it when we did this story about somebody saying relive the Second World War on a tour to Auschwitz, right? And it was written by AI, but was very badly written in very poor taste. But a number of Jewish friends of mine, I don't know if you were one of them, Asher, I seem to remember you were, kind of said, well, look, if you're going to go to Auschwitz, at least, even if you went for a bad reason, at least you know it's real. Yeah. And that kind of pushes forward education. I mean, people who...
I remember Elon Musk took his kid, like a 3-year-old. It was a bit weird. Although I suppose at 3 you're not really going to know. But it has become a bit like a theme park, hasn't it? I mean, I've never been... You've been up?
No, I've been to Belgium.
It's not a thing, but you know, people treat it like, oh yeah, I've got to go, and they do selfies and things there.
I mean, selfies with the shoes. I mean, that's not... Yeah. I mean, I'd be more bothered about selfies with the shoes at Auschwitz simply because it's a site of murder. Yeah. Pope Francis died of old age, right? So, and I think there's, you know, no matter how sad you are at somebody dying, there's a big difference between somebody dying age 90 and somebody dying age 5. I mean, that's just it's just inevitable because of the way it's unnatural. So, sounds like we've been relatively forgiving of the selfie papal people.
Very Christian spirit.
I would say so think about how Jesus spoke about this kind of thing. Jesus actually spoke and acted very irreverently around dead people at times. You know, he goes to a dead girl and says, "Get up and walk." And this would have seemed absolutely crazy to the people. But what Jesus constantly said was that the outside doesn't matter so much. Sometimes you do offend people. I'm not saying these kids did the right thing. Yeah. But he said what's much more important is, are you trying to follow God and trying to follow me? That's 10, 100, 1,000 times more important than whether you do the right thing in the eyes of the world.
Right.
And maybe that's what,
as long as they weren't doing selfies in front of when he was being crucified.
But they weren't doing selfies, and
when you come back, I'm going to tell you one of the finest stories about the Pope, but we do have to go to a break. Back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just want to say hello to Carol at Shoreham by Sea. I believe that will happen, by the way, in response to your text. Okay.
What?
Well, we're not going to say, are we? You know... Anyway, okay.
Oh, no, don't tell them that. Whatever you do.
So let me tell you this great story about the late Sir David Amess. Sir David Amess was leading a parliamentary delegation to the Vatican, and he wanted to have some rosary beads blessed for one of his relatives. I don't know who it was for. Anyway, so he was waiting on the front row with this delegation of Catholic leaders from the United Kingdom, and when the Pope came past, he was pushed against the barrier as people started trying to do all sorts of things. And he tried to get his hand in his pocket to pull out the rosary beads, but couldn't really get his hand in properly. And when he pulled his hand out, he discharged the rosary beads behind him, and some polos fell on the floor. The Pope spotted one of the polos. Sorry. Let me get this right. The woman next to him picked up the polo and put it in David Amos's hand. The Pope, assuming that Amos had wanted the polo blessed, simply blessed it and walked off. Well, of course, because these people were such devout Catholics, they then framed the holy polo, which I suppose was holy for two reasons.
The Pope's polo.
A polo blessed by the Pope. I mean, he wanted to come back with rosary beads. He came back with a polo blessed by the Pope. I mean, I have to say, I think I'd have probably eaten it.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Would that be a form of?
I don't know. I don't know what it would have been.
The mint with the holy.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
You can start whole.
So apparently he looked quite strange at Amos's hand with the polo in it, and went, "Oh well, sod it." And that was it. Okay. We didn't talk about assisted dying for 16-year-olds, did we? We meant to. So, okay, let's go through this. This is unbelievable. So in Scotland, they've decided that they want to include within the assisted dying euthanasia thing that they want to have 16-year-olds to also be included. So anyone over the age of 16 can demand to be euthanized, and that will happen. I personally believe that euthanasia is a nightmare.
Indeed.
I believe that I do accept that there are some cases with people in remarkable pain, though less so with modern medicine. But the dangers are so huge.
Crazy. Now, this is a bill that's being proposed in Scotland, and it's about to go to first vote on the 14th of May, the week's beginning 14th of May. And it is, listen to this, it is so crazy. So it is a bill that allows anyone over the age of 16, if they have any condition that could foreseeably lead to their death at some point in their lives.
Yeah, like being alive.
Well, that includes suicide, because it can include depression then, can't it? Because they say, well, they've said they're going to kill themselves. Exactly. And this happens in Belgium, and I think Canada. Yeah. In Canada, if you're skint, you can get euthanized because you've got no money now.
Well, exactly. I know Canada is definitely the wild west of all this stuff, and it is a picture of where this stuff leads, because everyone knows that this is.
Once you open that door, people say, "Oh no," but it always widens.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? No, exactly. And the slippery slope is already in action in Scotland without it even being legal, because this bill is so broad. So a condition that could foreseeably lead to your death. What about Down syndrome?
Yeah.
Because you have
that will shorten your life. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it should at least be, if it will definitely call it, like within 6 months, like this. But even then, you can't tell.
Yeah.
I mean, I always think it's a bad example, because James Whale is in favour of euthanasia, but whether he is in favour of euthanasia or not, it is simply a fact that for around 20 years the man has been regularly terminally ill, and medical advances have lengthened his life.
Well,
now,
it was the last 5-6 years.
Well, okay, 5 or 6 years then.
He got it 25 years.
I mean, at one point when I nominated him for his MBE, we didn't know that he'd make it as far as the ceremony.
Yeah.
And the ceremony must have been, it's about a year ago now, isn't it?
Well, we did his Lifetime show about 5 years ago. We have to keep re-recording it.
But what people don't realise, and I'm sure, Callum, you can explain in more detail, if I go in with cancer tomorrow, and by the way, there will be some people watching and listening who have had a cancer diagnosis today, be very careful when they say to you, you've got 6 months to live, and I'll tell you the reason. Because that is based on the treatment that has been approved on the day you were told. If there is treatment that gets approved next week, and there is every single month, there are more and more treatments, then but they can't come in and say to you, listen, mate, you've got 3 weeks to live, but we think next week there's going to be a new treatment come on board. Because then, in fact, doesn't happen. But that is
it's
reality,
worse than that. Another doctor can say, no, we can actually cure you of this. I heard a caller on Ian Collins' show, and they said, oh no, you can't have this operation. You've got 3 months. So she went to the next NHS trust, a few miles away, and they said, oh, I think we can do something. And they actually got rid of the cancer, and she lived another 8 years and died of natural causes.
Let me just share a story really quickly, because there's a Daily Mail interview that was just published this evening. A guy, Peter Seton Williams, and he was diagnosed in 2024 with motor neuron disease, told he had about 6 months to live, not to make any plans, and he was told it would be a painful and horrible death. And
you get locked in on yourself,
Exactly. On hearing this, he felt suicidal. He thought about jumping off a cliff. He made an appointment at Dignitas. A couple of weeks later, he managed to pull himself together and say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to face the end the way it comes. And he didn't seem to be getting any worse. And he kept going back and saying, are you sure it's motor neuron disease? Yes. And, any moment now, 3 months, 6 months. 10 months pass. He goes back. He has more tests. He does not have motor neuron disease. He has a perfectly curable condition. Peter Seton Williams, under this law, would have ended his life. They would have had the state end his life prematurely for no reason. And he's just one example.
Well, we had a woman on the show she was only a young woman, maybe about 35, 14. She was paralysed just because she bent down and picked something up.
That's right.
And she had kids, and for the first few months she wanted to end it all. She was just, I can't. She was a nurse, and I remember, and she said, I can't live. And then now she actually says, I'm actually glad I got it because it's changed the way I think about everything. And this was after like a year or whatever.
Yeah.
And also there are people who've got spinal injuries, let's be clear, who probably will be fine. I mean, who was I forget, somebody was saying to me, I think it was that lady, the pen lady, who said that she believes she will walk again, but it'll just take a time in order for.
Well, with AI now and exoskeletons, it's like a snowballing because now the research is done by computers.
Oh no, it wasn't.
Themselves.
It wasn't her. It's Tristan in Southend who had epilepsy, which he believes they've now cured with new drugs. Well, not cured it, but they've managed it, so he will have no further epileptic fits. He fell down once, cracked his head, and he's gone blind as a result.
Did you touch his retina?
He believes that his sight will be restored at some point because medical research is just exploding so quickly.
It really is not.
It is possible. I think it's striking that, when people talk about the death penalty, they say, look, if one innocent person is killed under the death penalty, it's too much and we cannot take that risk. And yet we see with euthanasia, countless people get killed because of mistakes in prognosis, in diagnosis, for many, many other reasons, and they're just accidents that are acceptable.
But it's exactly the same as the people who want to ban smoking tobacco but support the legalisation of smoking weed. And you think, well, at least be consistent. It's just complete madness.
But life's not taken. Have you noticed in the medical profession, it's not like life isn't taken that seriously anymore. It's sort of like, oh well, I've noticed that in hospitals.
It's not, and there used to be a sort of profound reverence for just the concept of life, that no matter how unable you were to do things, no matter how long you had left to live, no matter how useful you were in society, your life was valuable because human life is always valuable. And that's what I still believe.
Yes.
But sadly, most people in the profession don't think that way. They think your life is only valuable if you are useful and you can do things and you can enjoy it. And so this talk of quality of life, which of course it can make sense in certain contexts. We want people to have better quality of life, but it's become this concept where doctors will now say this person objectively has no quality of life and therefore objectively their life is not worth living, and so even if they want to keep living, we are not going to let them by giving them treatment because our objective medical judgment is that their life is not worth living, and that's where the
so they say, I want the cancer treatment, and the doctors say, come on, love, your life's not worth living anyway. No, but it is. No, but it's not. I'm sorry, I don't accept that.
They actually take parents to court, don't they, to turn off?
Yeah, they do, and that is outrageous. When my faith, the Catholic faith, is willing to fly the children to hospitals in Rome, and they say we're going to force the child, and they go, the child's brain dead, it's got no quality of life. Well, in that case, leave them to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there was one where I read.
But we can't do this right now simply because
we'll hear it after the news.
We're going to go to the press preview just in a couple of moments. You can give us a call 0344 499 1000. Two brilliant guests, Dr. Miller and Lois McClatchy Miller, back in a mo.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the press preview on Talk with Andre Walker, Asher Gould. We've also got our wonderful guest co-host in today, Dr. Callum Miller, who is both a doctor in the NHS and also a medical ethics researcher and broadcaster nowadays, somebody that we recruited, and Lois McClatchy Miller, relation, wife, who is a broadcaster, political commentator.
She wouldn't take his surname wholly, though. She had to keep a bit of herself.
Oh, dude, it's just a stage name. I'm really Lois Miller.
And Lois also works for a charity that supports people who've had their freedom of speech curtailed on the grounds that they're expressing Christian views. Asher, what have we got in the paper?
Let's start with the Daily Mirror and Mirror investigation. We tracked down second witness who put Serbian assassin in the fray and calls grow for a new probe into the 1999 murder that shocked the nation. Police are being urged to launch a review after we found new evidence linking a ruthless Serbian assassin to the Jill Dando murder case. A van driver said a man who he nearly hit after Crime Watch host Jill was shot in '99 looked like Milorad Ulemek, and there's a picture of Milorad Ulemek.
It's like the camp picture, if I'm being completely honest.
Action man, yeah. Veteran BBC. Anyway, the story was because during the problems in Serbia, NATO bombed a TV centre and they killed the sort of big star in the sort of Jill Dando of Serbia, and they said, you know, there was going to be repercussions, and so this has got the blame. There's also things that were saying she was about to unearth a BBC paedophile ring. You know, there's all kinds of rumours. Of course, Barry Bolsar, I forgot what his real name was, but he was a bit of a fantasy, Barry George. He eventually got released on appeal. They sort of fitted him up, it seemed. He had a speck of gunpowder and they found stuff, magazine. He had hundreds of magazines and they found one with Jill Dando in, and so they sort of added 2 and 2 and came to 5, although some police, you know, still say the case.
I've got to be honest with you, though. So first of all, absolutely should investigate this if more evidence has come to light. But at the same time, normally if there's a terrorist organisation, normally if there's retribution from a country, normally you admit to it, don't you? I mean, if a Serbian TV station was bombed, and it was, and a number of television stars were killed, and they were, and you wanted some retribution, and you killed Jill Dando, you wouldn't keep it a secret for the next 26 years.
Yeah, it's not a terrorist organisation we're talking about, but one of the key traits of a terrorist organisation is that they want to claim
publicity.
Yeah, So yeah, it is unusual that if it was an act of kind of defiance, that they would never, unless their defiance was just against Jill Dando herself or just against, you know.
Although I mean, it's an awful thing to say, but on a doorstep in Fulham, somebody walked up behind her and blew her brains out. I mean, that is
cold,
unusual. Right, it's.
They said it wasn't a professional hit, and then some say it was a professional, but there was one bullet. I mean, it was quite and it was a silence.
I think the big problem you've got is because the availability of weapons in the UK, professional hit can look very unprofessional because you get knockoff weapons, old weapons, World War II weapons. I mean, thankfully, buying a gun in this country is relatively difficult unless you're a legitimate person.
Right.
Although you can print them out now, apparently, on a 3D printer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Absolutely.
But don't do it. It's as illegal as a real gun. It is a real gun. So.
But Keir Starmer has banned ninja swords, or he's trying.
So that's good.
So we're all going to be...
No one can get a knife now. Yeah, it's ridiculous, that is.
Ninja swords, yeah. When they said... There's a knife crime epidemic in London. We're not going to bother with stop and search. What we'll do is we'll make it very, very hard for people to buy knives on Amazon. And you think...
By the way, Barry was acquitted. He did spend time in prison, but then there was appeal and he won the appeal.
I thought it was very sad with Barry George, simply because he said a load of old stupid things, but he was very clear that he was completely innocent.
He was a fantasist, and that's why he was Bolsara.
He wants to be Freddie Mercury's cousin.
Said he told people he was Freddie, and he had a bit where he sort of was like an evil Knievel. He was doing it. He was a bit, of a fantasist, and I think he was known in the area. And sometimes, remember with the, there was a lot of police then were fitting things up to fix
it's like that Richard Marx song Hazard, where basically somebody...
I don't know that. Can you give us a couple of
it's just kind of that kid's the weird one. Let's it must be him.
Especially with a very public case like this, you know, the public want a justice and they want the story to end and like a happy.
It's like when they arrested that teacher from Clifton College because a neighbour got murdered, and you know he did look a bit, but he was totally. It ruined.
It was a bit
life.
weird.
Yeah,
that was
but it was, they fit up people who fit the picture.
Yeah.
I worry about that, Callum, with policing, where what you do is you do the kind of the Columbo thing, which is start with the person that you believe did it, with your suspect, and then work backwards. Because you then do end up in a situation exactly like with Barry George, where you turn around and you go, he was obsessed with her, he had 3 magazines of her. He also had 40,000 other magazines. But then it just makes it look really bad.
Yeah, I mean, confirmation bias is what this is where you have a theory that you have in mind and then you sort of subconsciously ignore the evidence that doesn't fit it and go with the evidence that fits it, and it's an extremely common thing. So.
I heard something even more extraordinary, where there are situations where there's no evidence, it can make you even more of a big believer. Asher and I went to the Holocaust Educational Trust dinner a couple of years ago now, and somebody stood up and they said that what had happened was there was this bloke who was in the SS, who'd been arrested, but he'd been arrested by the Russians. He did 20 years in the Gulag and was released. Now, because of that, he'd been prosecuted and sentenced for his role in the Holocaust, and he returned to what they described as a major German car company. And this bloke went to interview him, and he said, look, you know, then he said it was just like a normal engineer bloke from Germany. And then he said, I asked him about the Jews, and this guy said he just clicked back into, you know, the attitude of the 1930s and 40s. And he was going on about the controlled banking, they did this, they abused people and all this. And he went, but hang on a second, there's no evidence for this. And he said, yes. Do you think they're stupid enough to allow any evidence to exist? Of course there's no evidence. And this guy was saying that this is this new concept in psychology now, where there are some people who will believe something more the less evidence exists.
Well, the Nazis, you know, notoriously destroyed all their evidence, didn't they? And Goebbels, you know, the propaganda minister for the Nazis.
Goebbels is an estate in Glasgow.
Goebbels had no balls at all. He actually said, always accuse your enemy of what you're guilty of.
Goebbels is a place. Goebbels, but anyway, but
yeah, it's in Glasgow, isn't it?
Yeah, but nonetheless, I mean that's always a worrying thing. I mean, I remember, without being funny, Lucy Letby, when they said in one of the cases she must have injected insulin because that's the only way, there'd be no evidence at all she did anything to the child. And you think that is a very dodgy claim, very dodgy indeed. Anyway, the next story, comment on running for our little girl, Southport Dad's marathon mission, and Alice de Silva Aguilar and Dad Sergio, top right. He's running the marathon to raise money. Elsie Dark Horse Stankham and below horrendous
BB King. Yeah. The Daily Mail. New online safety rules will leave children in danger. You see, they bring in these rules to stop what they call disinformation, but it's information they don't like getting out, and they use the children as the emotional blackmail. New online safety rules put the profits of big tech firms ahead of children's safety, campaigners warned last night. In an angry backlash, parents and the Children Commissioner said Ofcom's long-awaited rules did not go far enough. But they don't really want it for the children. It's to, you know, as I say, stop what they call disinformation. Real information.
I will tell you one thing. Once again, look, we're regulated by Ofcom. I'm not here to slag them off. They've got an important job to do. What I will say is, it is a ludicrous situation in the online safety bill that Ofcom are allowed to amend their own rules and regulations and then enforce them. I mean, that is just complete and total madness. And by the way, just in case people are going, oh, is he having to go at Ofcom? It wasn't them that came up with this idea,
Parliament.
But it's completely crazy to say that, you know, because all that happens is, if you lose a regulatory case against somebody like Talk, then what you do is just amend the rules and bring it again.
Yeah. Well, here's what I think about this. Like, why are they always talking about the harms that can be caused on Twitter or X and Facebook and Instagram? Why are they never talking about the harms that are caused on OnlyFans? Why is no one trying to shut down the porn sites? Why is it always about the free speech sites?
Because they use the children and they can't use it with that, but they use that as a Trojan
OnlyFans
horse.
is extremely destructive to children.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and that, you know...
I agree with that. If I'm being totally honest with you, I remember when I was at school, there was the sort of 1970s porn mags passed down from generation to generation, but they were little more than nudity, really. What we're seeing now online is, I mean, quite surprising content. I mean, just to be clear, this also goes out on Friday morning, so let's just...
What do you see? What do you see?
Well, I think what you see, let's be polite, what you see is an unreasonable representation of what a normal relationship is. It is not a normal relationship.
That's online generally.
But page after page, I mean, actually, to be fair, I'm not a subscriber, but my understanding is, I wouldn't care if I was, I'm an adult, but page after page of stuff that really does not represent what a genuine relationship is.
And you're feeding this stuff to teenagers. Lily Phillips, who's a very famous OnlyFans star who had the 1,000 men in one night thing. Yeah. She said, she's been in an interview recently, she said that she started watching porn at 11 years old.
Doesn't surprise me.
11 years old.
But she also, I mean, she has become very rich off what is at best risky behaviour. Let's just, whatever you think. But you're absolutely right. They're bothered about material that goes online. But this self-amending, Callum, this self-amending regulation for online means that any time this quango. Now, nothing wrong with being a quango if all you're doing is enforcing the law, but when you are now making the law, the crazy situation that Ofcom makes the law and enforces it.
And they're all captured institutions.
It's a very classical tactic of the far left extremists, which is that you outsource regulation and policy making to other organisations that you know are going to do what you really want to do. Yes. They can't get away with politically. So you can do it with the judges, with the regulatory bodies, all sorts of people. And it's a very effective tactic. So Keir Starmer can get away with saying,
everyone sees through it, but they just still
But it doesn't matter.
Well, the politicians could say, look, we've been very moderate, we haven't done anything too crazy, we've just appointed judges who will...
But they say, it's disinformation, but look at COVID, look at nearly everything, and it turns out it wasn't disinformation, they were spreading the disinformation.
What I will have to do, one will assume with my YouTube channel, which you can search YouTube and go for, you go for Andre Walker. Presumably my YouTube channel will have to domicile outside the United Kingdom because it will be made illegal under UK regulations, one would assume.
Yeah, but what happens if you watch it in the UK? You know, where does
Can they extradite him?
But by the way, the big danger that you have with all of these things now is when they're talking about balance. Balance is one of the stupidest things in media because at the end of the day, people, I believe, our viewers and listeners want to understand the issues, not have to do with... I mean, if we'd have brought in Lois and Callum and two people that supported abortion, how interesting would that have actually been for the viewers and listeners? I don't think it would have been.
Too many voices, you know.
Yeah.
And not enough space as well.
I think people are not stupid. They can see, look, the two of us are against abortion. We think that babies and women should be protected. And they know that that's a belief we have and that we're going to, represent that view. They're intelligent enough to disagree.
Right.
But the great danger is when people are pretending that you're lying. So you've been completely honest. Now, obviously, you've highlighted issues in a way. I mean, you contend that even if there was one case where euthanasia had killed somebody it shouldn't have, then because of the principle that was established under the getting rid of the death penalty, then that would be consistent. Somebody else might disagree. It doesn't matter that element as long as you're telling the truth about the facts.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, I think you're right. We over-assume that people can't formulate their own opinions. I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago with Billboard Chris, and he had a case where he had tweeted his opinion about trans ideology in kids, and the Australian government censored that because they're scared that Australians will see it and then start to think differently. You know, the British people, the Australian people all over the world can handle hearing an opinion and make their own mind up about it.
Yeah. What about this whole brain mush theory that goes on with TikTok, that we're broadcasting such rubbish on TikTok now that it's actually damaging to children?
What are Chinese using it? Because in China it's educational. They're using it as a weapon. You know, China and Russia are going, don't worry, it's like Sun Tzu, the art of war. If your enemy's destroying itself, don't interrupt them. And that's what they're doing.
It's such an effective weapon. Do you remember for like one day it looked like in the US that they'd shut down TikTok and the whole of Gen Z went mental, absolutely mental. And the government had to Trump had to backtrack on this.
But I don't understand. TikTok's rubbish.
I know.
I mean, why? Somebody's dancing around or something. I mean,
The strangest thing is we know it's a CCP, Chinese Communist Party psyop, that is like the purpose of it is to implant terrible ideas into our children in the West.
And it's working.
And yet we're going along with those ideas. So the CCP is sending us, go and get out, go and have sex and have an abortion at 14, go and change your gender. And we're applauding it.
Look at all our politicians kowtowing to China with everything. So there's no way. And the same in America, because that's where the money is now.
Yeah, but it's like a drug addiction, especially if these kids are getting.
It is dopamine hits, isn't it?
Addiction, especially because the TikTok algorithm, they're the only app that's worked out how to do this. But you don't have to even tap it with your phone. You don't.
But shouldn't they be banned for like under 16s? They're saying that now it will be looked at smoking in 20 years. It was ridiculous. We gave kids smartphones and iPads.
Absolutely.
I'd love to ban smartphones for under 16s.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
I mean, Lois was listening to the news earlier, and it was the strangest thing ever. There were good ideas being proposed by politicians. Even the Liberal Democrats came up with a good idea to ban playing music out loud on public transport. When the Liberal Democrats are coming up with good ideas.
Do me a favour, because it's during the election. Let's not name any political parties. But I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I don't think smartphones have been helpful. Because of course, look, teenagers are teenagers, right? What I'm saying as a 46-year-old is not what I would have done as a 15-year-old. Yeah, but if you've got connected on the bus on the way home, do your homework. Nobody's going to do that. No. It's not going to happen.
And the stuff that you're tweeting or saying online when you're 15 is not the stuff that you want to be public when you're 25.
We never had online when I was 15.
Right, and the things like, can you imagine the stuff that you would have said at that age? Just
we did say we could at that age. Yeah. But also magazines in bushes with bushes.
But also private, but also private part photos which find their way onto all sorts of websites. And actually, you can't blame teenagers for being remiss, because that's the nature of being a child. You make mistakes, right? It's just one of those things. But it's just awful for those people that have taken photos and videos of themselves on a smartphone and sent it, that forevermore the perverts of the world will be exchanging it. And there's really very little you can do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I think we should go to
we'll go to a break, and then we've got a bit of Keir Starmer. Look, he's got a helmet on his head. More in a couple of minutes.
He is a helmet.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is the press preview on Talk with Andre Walker, Asher Gould, Dr. Callum Miller, and Mrs. Lois McClatchy Miller. Yes, they are related, but both of them experts in their own right on things like ethics and defence of our traditional values.
Right, look, don't forget Mike Graham. He's looking at us through the window. He makes me feel uncomfortable when he's so he'll be on after us if you're listening in the morning. Anyway, back to Keir Starmer with a helmet on his head. Let's see what's going on. He looks ridiculous. So Keir Starmer pictured ahead of his trip to HMS Prince of Wales said Britain would stand by Volodymyr Zelensky in peace talks. So this is all heating up now because Putin bombed Kiev yesterday, killing 13 or 14 civilians. And Trump said, stop! Stop it. And that's all he said. Starmer challenges Trump's peace plan. PM stands by Zelensky and refuses to back giving away Crimea in Telegraph interviews. To Keir Starmer has insisted that Ukraine must be allowed to decide the terms of any peace deal with Russia. But I mean, surely we don't have the say in this because we haven't got the troops. We're not the country we used to be. It's surely basically up to Trump because he's the one that's going to sort of back all this.
I have to say, I'm not keen on the Ukrainians taking Crimea because the problem is, and this is one thing that people forget, in Eastern Europe, people talk about goodies and baddies, but the level of treatment of minorities in Eastern European countries is far, far lower than what it is in the United Kingdom. I think if you sent the Ukrainian army into the Russian areas, well, into Crimea, which is largely Russian-speaking, I think it would be bad. I'm sorry to say, and people can disagree, but I think the problem is we've got this concept of goodies and baddies, and there's no doubt that Putin is a baddie. But can I just make a point that, look, if Putin was a British political leader, he'd be in prison, but so would Zelensky. You know, the way that Zelensky exonerated his former boss of a $5 billion bank heist was not acceptable.
And they ban Russian speakers and stuff like that. I mean, there was, you're right, if it's a mainly Russian area. But I mean, what's your views of what should we do? I mean, morally, people say we've got to stand up to Ukraine, but then, you know, Trump's right. He goes, they can't win the war. They could go on another 3 years. But Russia, he doesn't care about millions of his people and North Koreans and Chinese going there. So it sounds unfair, but is it practical? Can we, you know, is he right, Trump?
I mean, I think, you know, ultimately in life, sometimes you don't have the perfect option to take. You don't even have a good option to take. The reality is, you know, we can't just say to Putin, look, this is wrong of you, go home and stop killing people, because he did this for a reason.
But Callum, let me ask you this question. We know that Putin's principal interest is theft, and we know he's not bothered about the children of anybody else. But he has got 2 daughters, one of whom lives in Norway, the other one lives just down the road in the United Kingdom. Why don't we arrest them 2 for money laundering and racketeering? And why don't we extradite them to the United States of America and sentence them to 50 years in a supermax each? And then see how interested he is in negotiating, because he's not bothered about other people's children being in the firing line. I mean,
but he would do it against Americans, then, wouldn't he? That's what. Yeah, but
bear in mind, this man is such a remarkable hypocrite that he has sent his daughters to the UK and Norway in order to hide his ill-gotten gains. Let's be clear, there are very real questions about whether he was the real owner of Chelsea Football Club, the level of money that he has pumped into the United Kingdom. We had the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia had a £5 million flat on Whitehall Place. The man earns 40 grand a year.
Well, he owns all the oligarchs. Do you remember he had that meeting and he said, well, you've got to all make sure you give Russia, you know, a percentage of what you want. And he does own them all. And they're basically the ones doing the business for him, because he can't obviously go around doing this, but he takes his cut.
But what about
that's how the mob works.
Every single time any of his daughters received money, it was looted from the Russian state, and it was put through the United Kingdom illegally under money laundering laws. Let's do them for every single one, and let's go American style-y. Every single offence is another 3 years in prison, and we'll do them consecutively, 800 years in Belmarsh. And the reason I make that point, Callum, is because he is allowing other people's children to die whilst his grandson goes to a private school in Weybridge.
It's the same with our politics. Remember Tony Blair, though, with Iraq?
I mean, his grandson's in a private school in the United Kingdom, and he's going, we're going to nuke Britain. Are you really? Is that why you spirited your own family away from Russia?
Well, I think it comes to a wider point that, you know, we often have politicians making decisions that ultimately don't come back to them in any way, especially when it comes to military ventures.
Yes, correct.
And I think that's fundamentally at the heart of this is the more that politicians, you know, in the olden days, you would have the king or the politicians leading the charge in the battlefield.
Well, like Churchill,
and then it actually made a difference, the decisions they made. Right.
And came
and
back.
I think, you know, it's not to say this exactly the same approach is wise for today, but it is to say that it's very easy when your family is not involved to make these decisions that can be extremely reckless, whether you're Russian or Ukrainian or English or American. I think all of these leaders can be making huge mistakes by getting people involved in conflicts when ultimately it's other people's.
Well, I mean, I don't believe in the International Criminal Court, but I mean, Tony Blair's absolute dog's dinner of a case for the war in Iraq. I thought I was in favour of the war in Iraq because I assumed, as Ian Duncan Smith did, who was Conservative leader at the time, that there was some intelligence that sat behind it.
Right.
We didn't know there was none. I mean, when the Prime Minister goes, I can't tell you everything, but we didn't realise he was on Wikipedia.
That's true. But I liked your point earlier, Andre, about, we are so quick to have black and white, good and bad. This one's the villain, this one's the hero. And it's just how the press kind of feeds us, because it's, I guess, how, it's how a typical children's story goes. And so that's how we're used to consuming, international politics. But you're right, there's no absolutely good country, there's no absolutely bad country. They're all...
I mean, there is this bit that people forget. There is a big advantage, and we've seen this in multiple countries. I think that the Moldovan election is a prime example of where actually by annexing a bit of a country that's Russian speaking, you actually reduce the population of people that are going to vote for a pro-Putin candidate. I don't think President Sandu of Moldova would have been re-elected had Transnistria actually all voted en masse, and even then she only scraped in with the diaspora vote. But it's the same in Georgia. I mean, Georgia's now got a fairly pro-Russian president, I think it is. But look, the reason why Zelensky was elected is largely because Crimea didn't vote. And then you think, well, hang on, where does that leave us? Because ultimately, if what you're going to do is say, let's take back the whole of Ukraine, and the end result of that will be a pro-Russian president will be elected in the place of Zelensky, then ultimately you just end up back where they were when they started, what was it, the Purple Revolution in central Kiev.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it depends what you do with the people of Crimea, because we know that Ukraine did not treat ethnic Russians and Russian-speaking people well. And, there's an argument that, well, maybe if they did take back Crimea and had all the southeast of Ukraine, they wouldn't just leave the Russians there to vote for pro-Putin people. They would try and kick them out. And
I mean, also, obviously, this is running in the morning, but I mean, the widespread punishment of Russian speakers that involves cling film, a telegraph pole, and dog food is so obscene. Is so obscene that it would be absolutely wrong to describe it. But I think you can work out what would take place with cling film and dog food and leaving you out overnight. Not very pleasant at all.
I haven't worked it out, but I don't think I want to. Cyclists face life in prison for killing pedestrians, but it'll never happen, will it? Cyclists who kill pedestrians are to face life imprisonment under new laws. The offence of causing death by dangerous cycling will be brought into line.
They never stop for a red light.
Yeah, well, we still had a Victorian law with the bikes, and it was driving in a furious manner, cycling in a furious manner, the law. So they've updated it. I remember that, people are riding around with illegal bikes with no brakes and stuff like that. Jobless young won't work for under 40 grand. But I mean, 40 grand now, it seems a lot, but actually we're lagging behind a lot of countries. In America, the average wage is $65,000. In Europe, they're earning a lot more. We've been held back in this country, and sometimes I think, the unions are right to demand more.
But if you're on benefits and you've got a couple of kids,
yeah, you'll
be better off than 40 grand a year, won't you?
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, with your housing.
And also the other point to make, that this is a national broadcast. The people who are living in the southeast of England, £40,000 will be a very low figure. Obviously, people living in the Hebrides, it would be a comparatively high figure. Yeah. So it does. There is a massive disparity.
Was it you that told me the other day that we're closer now to the economy of Romania than we are to the economy of the USA?
I think that's right. Yeah.
We're behind some African states now. Our GDP per capita.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we're right.
What we've done is, by bringing in uncontrolled immigration, it expands the economy, but it reduces your per capita wealth.
Right. Yeah.
Trans Britain, this is one for you. Trans Britain's fleeing for asylum claims. By
the way, that's Michael Cashman, that idiot off EastEnders, who once claimed that the Sun were trying to accuse him of being a sex offender. The guy's just all over the place.
Trans people are seeking asylum abroad amid fears for their safety. It's not changed. They're in the same thing. I mean, it's the same. They've just clarified the judgment. Lord Cashman said his friends were looking to leave Britain after the country's highest court ruled that transgender women are not legally women. Last week, judges insisted that ruling did not dilute protections for trans people against direct discrimination. But during a debate in the Lords, Cashman said trans people in this country live in fear. They live in fear of their safety, their futures. They had sweaty palms like that.
Why? Why?
But look,
what are you scared of?
But let's reality check here. Michael Cashman is a propagandist, Right? He's not a genuine, sensible politician. He's a propagandist. His career in the European Parliament was basically zero. He didn't do anything of any real value. All he is somebody who appeared in EastEnders as a gay character, and then the Labour Party were determined to put him up on a pedestal as if he'd done something worthwhile with his life. I would, if Lord Cashman was sat here, I would say to him, give me the names of the trans people that have claimed asylum abroad since this rule came through from the Supreme Court. If you can name one, I will give you £1,000.
And then it would go do. Anyway, with that, we'll go to a break, but we'll come back with Who Are You? And this is a big story because a ref, and I'll quote, found a turd in one of his shoes. Back in a couple of minutes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is Talk, and this is the press preview with Andre Walker, Asher Gould, Lois McClatchy-Miller and Callum Miller, both of whom are our guest co-hosts this morning, and I think have brought some real clarity to some of the moral issues that have come about. And this is not a moral issue that's about to come up now.
Keir Starmer likes clarity, doesn't he? Yeah.
He likes claret.
The Daily Star, thought of the day, that's offside, and he's talking about the story here. Who are you? And there's a ref with, it should be a brown card, but it's a red card, and they've censored the photo because what happened, there's the story. Footy bosses are investigating after a lower league match had to be abandoned because the ref found a turd in one of his shoes. That deserves a red card. Why didn't he, borrow other shoes? In the old days, he'd get some.
I think it was the fact that it was a noxious substance left in his clothing.
Yeah, I mean, he could have, maybe it was him, maybe,
I don't think it was the lack of shoes that were the problem, actually.
No, but, a ref should always have a spare pair for just such an instance.
No, with respect, that wasn't the issue. The issue was he's basically been attacked, hasn't he?
Oh, was it? It wasn't that he couldn't wear his shoe.
No, I don't think he was bothered.
So he was just so hurt by the turd.
But somebody's put a biological weapon in your shirt.
It's not very nice.
It's a very serious. So yeah, you're right. It's not just the impracticality; it's the hurtfulness of it. It is very hurtful, isn't it? I never thought of that. Anyway, the other story here: you're eating it wrong, and I read about this earlier. We've been eating chocolate digestives wrong. Apparently, the digestive was invented in about 1817. In the 1920s, they decided to coat it in chocolate, dark or light. I think you can tell a lot from a person whether they like dark or milk. I quite like the dark. I think it means you're more sophisticated.
You're more sophisticated, that's
more
true.
sophisticated.
You like to think you are.
Anyway, you're eating it wrong. You should be eating it with that on your tongue. But I think that's wrong. You should have the thing hitting your roof and then landing on the tongue through the
What, you think the chocolate
biscuit.
should be down?
Yeah, well, they're saying this. The boffins say it should be going in down, which
but
is.
Don't you naturally? I mean, not that this is
that
interesting for a press preview, but don't you naturally assume that something that is topped?
Mike's liking it. Look at him. He's looking through the window.
But don't you assume that something that has a topping, you automatically eat with the topping
It's
upwards?
the top, yeah.
Because it's called like the
it's
topping.
the balance of it.
But it turns out it's a bottoming. So try it. But I don't think
What
it's
a
too
front
much.
page! My goodness.
You can't dissolve it on your saliva.
Do you if you eat, I like eating pizza with a knife and fork, but when you don't, do you fold the pizza over?
No.
Just a bit in the middle?
No, because that's
most
a
people in the
calzone,
general.
isn't it? But I mean, Doctor, you'll know about this. If you put the bit with the chocolate down, the salivary amylase isn't going to soak through because the chocolate will seal it. Whereas if you put it in the bottom, you've got the starch that will enter the blood system and it will melt. And like you dunk a
Good point.
digestive. I'm all right. Right, okay. Well, it's got no answer.
By the way,
That's above his pay grade, that one.
Dr. Miller, did you shrug then because you don't know the answer or because you didn't care?
I was going to say you're absolutely right, but then I might have got struck off if I was wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You see, they're worried about that. He
I
was
wanted
saying
to affirm you.
the biscuit is the wrong chocolate and everything like that. Yeah, it's a
By the way,
minefield.
digestives are rubbish anyway, aren't
They're
they?
the best
think
way.
so?
Okay.
If I had to
chocolate
live on a
digestive.
biscuit, one biscuit the rest of your life, I'd
You go
not.
through
Yeah.
phases.
Chocolate
Well,
digestive
Jaffa
with a cup
cakes
of
would be the
tea.
one. But...
Do you remember
Text us your favourite fig
disputes
rolls.
about whether Jaffa
Is it a
cakes
biscuit or a
were
cake?
cakes
Yeah.
or biscuits?
Well, there was a court case because it was a
Okay.
tax reason.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah, they
50%
said-
on it.
They said a cake.
Yeah.
A cake is soft and goes hard if left out. So does a Jaffa cake. A biscuit is hard but goes soft if left out.
And it was
a good
M&S.
point.
It was M&S and McVitie's. And also in the court case, they brought out a giant Jaffa cake, and they said, "Look, that's a cake." And then they brought out a giant digestive, and they go, "Well, it's clearly not a cake, is it?"
But the reason is,
and they won the case, and
because-
got millions of pounds back.
the reason is because a cake is food, whereas biscuits is a snack. Therefore, I think there's VAT. No
Yeah.
VAT
I
on
spoke
food.
to a baker once, and he said, "Our gingerbread men, if we draw an icing nose and eyes on, it's like you have to add the tax, because if it doesn't have that on, it's actually classed as a bread. But if you put the icing, draw icing on it, it becomes."
Right, can I just say one thing?
yeah.
Can I just say one thing?
What's that?
The gallery has just said the reason it's a cake is because if you leave it out, it starts soft but it goes stale and goes hard like a cake. But that is precisely what I said about 3 or 4 minutes ago.
He was just reiterating.
It was affirming.
As it's almost as if the gallery aren't listening.
And the Metro, that must be the Newcastle paper. The Metro lost.
Hey, by the way, can I just say one thing? I meant to say this about Jaffa cakes. You know, we were talking about Serbia earlier. Tito came over to the United Kingdom. You know how communist dictators had whimsical things? He came over.
Yeah, he was in one of the Jackson brothers.
No, Tito, the Yugoslav dictator, came over to Britain and he said, right, I've discovered this thing called Jaffa cakes, but we're going to make them better because we're going to make them in 5 different flavours. And somebody went, but Jaffa means orange. You went, don't care. Right, so they have lime Jaffa cakes.
Oh, no.
They have like apple Jaffa cakes and all this. But Jaffa cakes are eaten widely in Serbia, but they have multiple flavours.
Yeah, in Italy, I've heard they have a Jaffa cake, but it's a blackcurrant one, and apparently it's amazing.
They occasionally do it in the UK, but it's just a bit pointless, and it's...
Well, if it's Jaffa, it's supposed to be oranges,
You want
isn't
the
it?
fizzy
Unless
orange.
it's
Yeah.
unless it's the medical Jaffas, which nobody would want to eat. Well,
Yeah, Rigella lives in Jaffa, doesn't he? The Metro lost chance to stop tech firms killing our kids. Father of teen suicide victim says 40-point code is too cautious. Social media, well, they're not really doing it for the kids, are they? Social media giants will be fined unless they bring in tougher systems to stop children accessing harmful content, but the new rules have been criticised for putting reckless tech firms first. Isn't it up to the parents to police their children's what they view?
Well, what if we just ban smartphones and they can't access the
Exactly,
internet
and
anyway?
iPhones, and you just go on their home computer and the parents can monitor it.
Right.
I think that's perfectly fine. If you've got a computer, you can go on all this stuff. If you've not got a computer, because it's not so much you know, that kids are accessing it all. You can access this stuff. It's just when not all the time accessing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you have a computer with the kind of face out to where the parents are, there's ways that you can monitor these things.
I
But
do worry though. One of these front pages. Let me get this back. I think it said. Let me just remind ourselves. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Let me just read this to you because it's important. Apologies for just being a bit weird there, but. An angry backlash. Parents and the Children's Commissioner said Ofcom long-awaited rules did not go far enough. Once again, and this is the second week running, we have a quango which has decided that it wants to tell the government what to do. So the Children's Commission is saying, I am here to look after the interests of children in line with legislation, but what I'm going to do is use my budget to lobby for legislation for me to then enforce. It's exactly the same as the Human Rights Commission last week supporting the subjugation of women. at the High Court, at the Supreme Court.
I also think it's just creepy when any state agency says that they're here to protect children, or here to speak up for children, because parents are there to speak up for their children and to protect their children. And when the state does that for them, it diminishes that role and diminishes the right of parents.
But this becomes completely circular now, doesn't it? Because we've said about Ofcom, once again, not slagging them off, but the legislation is stupid. So now Ofcom can change the legislation itself, it's self-amending, and then enforce it. So they're judge, jury, parliament, all of the things simultaneously. The Children's Commissioner are spending money slagging off the government for failure to enforce whatever rules the children... So it's now the Children's Commissioner tells the government what legislation the Children's Commissioner is going to enforce. That's why we have all these problems with things like non-crime hate incidents, because the quangos are making the law.
But we know this lot, they don't care about children. There's hundreds of thousands of girls that can testify to that who've been raped and tortured.
By the way,
they use it because people can't argue with it once they coach the children. It's an emotional blackmail, and if you argue against it, they go, "Oh, how dare you? It's to save the children."
Yeah, it's exactly the same as Black Lives Matter. Exactly. If you do not believe in the abolition of the police, you want black people to die.
Yeah.
The Guardian, Vladimir, stop! Trump in rare rebuke to Putin after Kiev strike. Donald Trump issued a rare rebuke of Moscow yesterday for a devastating air attack that killed 12 in Kiev, telling the Russian president on his social media, Truth Social, Vladimir, stop. I mean, he's sort of losing control a bit, Trump, isn't he? He said he'd end it in the first day, and Putin's playing him, the art of the deal's looking ridiculous. He's offered him everything at first. I mean, how is that the art of the deal? And these tariffs are going not too well with the US markets. So what do you think?
Once again, Children's Commissioner on the front page of The Guardian, and The Guardian says that Dr. Sousa, whose role was created by the government to protect children, is angry about the way. So it's almost like the argument of the Children's Commissioner is, you made me the Children's Commissioner. It's my job to tell you how to look after children. Don't you think that Parliament can do that on my behalf? I know best. Yeah. Very, very dangerous in terms of democracy.
Well, I think, speaking to friends who work in the sort of tech industry against sex trafficking and these genuine, horrendous human rights abuses, they say it is possible to have technological solutions that genuinely protect children while also preventing a surveillance state.
Yes.
It is possible.
Which
raises the question, then why are we not chasing those solutions?
Because it's not for the children.
Well, exactly.
It's not for
because
that at all.
everything we see from the government is about surveillance, whether it's asking Apple for a backdoor on their advanced data protection. So Apple says, we're actually just going to shame you and say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to give you a backdoor.
So we're removing... 5 minutes, though, Callum.
Well, this is the thing. These issues are so important because they are... We go back to the conversation on China earlier. Part of the reason the UK government is not particularly worried about China is because it wants to be something like China in terms of the surveillance.
With the social credit system, that's
where we're going. With the social credit, with the surveillance.
Digital wallets and all that stuff.
And these are some of the most important issues of our society because they're fundamentally about whether we will be a free state or not.
It's 1984.
And yet they're side stories in the media. Yeah. They're side stories. The questions of...
Because they're in it as well, the media, apart from us and some other media, the vast majority are with the government.
Love it.
So the question is, should Apple, who make, a significant proportion of the people of this country's phones and computers, should they be forced to give your data over to the government or to give the government a backdoor to your private data? Should there be VPNs, which Keir Starmer in campaigning said he was against them and wanted to ban them like maybe 2 other countries in the world? Yeah. These are some of the most profound questions about
just
our
help us
privacy.
out a little bit, because in this room we know what a VPN is. Just explain
Visible
to those who don't.
line.
So I'm certainly not a sort of IT expert, but it basically it's a virtual private network. It basically sort of protects the privacy of your internet traffic.
So they can't get your IP address.
So what it effectively does is it creates a tunnel from your computer of encrypted data to an exit point in another country, effectively. So what might happen is the British government is watching all of your data, but your computer can now send encrypted data past all the government snoopers, but it doesn't make any sense to them. And when it comes out in Mongolia, nobody takes any notice.
So I landed for a layover in the United Arab Emirates, and I get a notice on my phone saying we've turned your VPN off because it's illegal here, and if you turn it back on, you could be prosecuted.
Wow.
That was the only time I've ever been to another country that had that sort of law.
Wow.
And would you go there again? Because I don't like these countries like that.
Well, you've got to pretend they're nice people and they're not.
That is what Keir Starmer wanted for the UK, and probably will still try to bring in.
He's like a communist, let's face
Keir
it.
Keir Starmer's belief, Lois, is that government good, private citizen bad.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, Prevent in the last few years started raising like personal and legitimate beliefs of common people as a potential trigger for looking into someone for extremism or radicalization. I noticed pro-life views on the training course I did with Prevent of how to spot a radical extremist. The belief that abortion is wrong, which might not be the majority of our country, but it's certainly quite a fair few people who have.
What they need to do is, and this is one thing that Prevent and certainly the police have sought to do, is because they know that uncontrolled immigration from the third world has caused a lot of societal problems, they want to balance it out by throwing a fair number of what they call far-right people into prison. Yeah. I remain to be convinced, and I've said this multiple times on this show, that the guys who got drunk in Wetherspoons, Warrington, and started gobbing off about how much they dislike Labour MPs actually constitutes a genuine terror cell. They were in a pub drunk.
Yeah, or even, the people who pray silently in their heads. Abortion facility getting convicted twice now in the last 6 months. People have been convicted for that crime of praying or just holding a sign saying here to talk if you want. These are the people that the government are cracking down on. Meanwhile, crime is a...
Well, do you remember a few years ago, many years ago, the police infiltrated environmental groups and actually went so far the undercover officers had relationships while they were married. They got these women pregnant. They've had kids, basically, that are now having to be paid for by the Met Police.
Oh, my goodness.
They literally had proper full relationships and were just lying and had babies with them.
Well, let's not go to the next front page. Let's go to a break and we'll be back in a moment.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
OK, we're going to be a little bit naughty now. We're going to break an embargo, but it's only by 10 minutes.
But it says "bungoed" immediate release. I mean, it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's a good point. OK, so the embargo is on a story that says 2 million crimes went unsolved in England and Wales in 2024, equivalent to 5,719 every day, 39% of all crime. The police have given up, Lois, haven't they?
And that's 39% of all recorded. Most people don't even report it.
No point.
Well, don't worry, because if you tweet a criticism of the Pride Parade or a joke about gender ideology, don't worry, the police will come there. Don't worry, the grandmas who pray outside abortion facilities, they're going to be under lock.
If somebody robbed me, I'd just misgender them.
Right.
The police would be straight round to investigate.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good that we don't have any real crimes in this country, so the police
It's horrendous.
focus.
Do you know, people don't know this, but and I've said this before, so maybe people do on this show, because presumably they watch every week, but when they first invented, when Robert Peel first invented the police, there was a specific protection that made it illegal to be a police detective. Very quickly, the police began having detectives operating illegally. And the reason why Peel brought in the exemption that made it illegal to be police detectives is because people said, what will happen is we will start by having these guys patrolling the streets, but slowly but surely they will cease patrolling the streets, and they instead will just snoop on ordinary people and try and enforce some sort of morality that the government likes. I'm afraid by legalising police detectives, that is literally precisely what happened.
That is a unique historical take, but yeah, we've got every...
Well, look, you know, ultimately, you may say that police detectives have another value, and they do, but there is no doubt that a specific concern that was raised when police were created has proved to be true, which is if your house has been burgled and you tweet something negative about a trans person, you know, the burglary will not be investigated, but the negative tweet will be.
Yeah.
Fact.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's horrific. I mean, we were talking earlier about this kind of topsy-turvy world where the unimportant things are put front and centre in the press and the real important things are ignored. And that's exactly what we see in our policing system. And it affects the lives of everyday people.
Of course it does.
You can't visit a supermarket, even, you know, in bougie places in the middle of London, Kensington and all these kind of places. You can't visit a supermarket without noticing someone
I
run
had a
out.
fight with the shoplifter, you know.
Did you?
Didn't last long because the staff said, unfortunately, if this fight goes any further, you will be arrested for assaulting him and he will be let off. Yeah, because they don't prosecute for the shoplifting, but they do prosecute for assaulting somebody randomly when they leave a shop. And in legal terms, as far as they were concerned, what I was doing was assaulting him.
If it was unreasonable force.
No, it doesn't matter, because they just say, well, you know what, you have to let him leave because I don't know. But anyway, they said if the police had attended, I'd have been arrested for assaulting him and he'd have been allowed to leave with the stuff.
I've said it on this
Well, he
show.
probably wouldn't have been allowed to leave with the stuff. I was probably going too far.
Yeah, but who I feel sorry for is the bouncers who still are paid to be there but can't do anything.
No.
And it just looks kind of pathetic, you know. They're just like watching this stuff happen all day, and they're, you know, beefed up guys. They
have bouncers in your supermarket.
Yeah,
Why
they have
are they
security.
there?
A bow tie and a suit.
Why do they pay for these security?
I know, I
guards?
think that. Yeah,
They aren't allowed to do anything.
My local Sainsbury's in Ascot looked like John Pienaar. But anyway,
they have those cardboard cutouts of policemen that do actually, because they're a bit thick, some of these thieves. They go, look, there's a copper, but he's not moving. We better not go in there.
But it's amazing. You're right. The security who are not allowed to touch anyone.
Well, I mean, if a political party could guarantee that they would get rid of most crime in this country, they would easily win an election.
Yeah.
People care that if they go out in public, they have to be careful of their purse, their wallet. They care about if they're on the bus, whether people are threatening to punch them. They care about all of these things.
How about this, Callum? Go back to the system in the Middle Ages, which is this. There's such thing as an outlaw. If you are in the process of committing crime, the law offers you no protection. Therefore, if somebody comes into your house and you willfully beat them to death, then because they broke into your house and they were operating illegally, the law does not protect them in any way. Now, I have to say to you, I suspect burglary would decline, so I'm not arguing in favour of people being beaten to death. I'm saying that threat, which is you are no longer protected by the law.
Like Texas, no one does them in Texas, do they?
I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't dare rob a house in Texas.
No, exactly right. So if you are in the process of shoplifting, if somebody were to stab you, that would be entirely legal. Now, I'm not saying that I want that to happen. What I'm saying is that it now comes in as a massive deterrent, doesn't it? Because you don't know anybody.
But we used to have store detectives that would physically stop people. What's happened to all that? Security.
There's no point.
Security people.
Because the problem is the police will not allow you to grab them. So you have to let them
But they
leave.
used to. So what's changed in that time?
It's all to do with human rights, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But I think the point is, this is not just like an annoyance. This is something that people care about.
Yeah.
Every single person I know cares that when they go out in public, they know they're not really that safe. They know that people are just going to steal from the supermarket.
Well, it puts up the prices
they know
of
that
everything.
If someone's playing loud music on a bus, and I don't want to look like I'm obsessed with this, though clearly I am. Someone plays loud music on a bus and you tell them, please be quiet, they might stab you.
Yeah.
And they'll go free.
Get away with it, yeah.
So these are genuine issues that no one seems to care about solving.
The extent to which, so you're a newly married couple, right? You know, saving up for deposits and doing all these usual things. You know, when you walk into a supermarket, you've got to feel a little bit of, why am I paying? Now, I'm not encouraging people to not pay, because obviously we can't rail against the problem and then say make it worse, but I'm there. I mean, boop, 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 paying for all my stuff, and somebody's walked out with 48 cans of Stella, whatever, and they haven't fought for it, they haven't run, they've just walked out.
And what they're doing is jacking up the prices for us when we were paying legitimately.
And you start to feel stupid for paying.
Well, the Sun did that, hit with the Greggs, and the Greggs released it, and the Sun showed a video. People were just going in and blatantly taking it and just walking out. There was no like Andres, there was no hiding it. They were just taking the sausage roll, and they were actually making a hole. They go, oh yeah, I'll have the. They were looking around and picking.
But the other thing is, we had this conversation a year or two ago. Do you remember? There was this big media story. All the shops are getting suddenly angry because
they're all shut down now. A lot of these shops.
And yet. A year or two later, we're here having the same conversation. This should be the easiest thing in the world for Parliament to legislate on, for the police to act on.
But like the boats coming in,
why is it so
like all
difficult?
These things, they're not doing anything.
Is it the civil service? If so,
I used to work on Tooley Street, which ironically is one street over from here. I used to work on Tooley Street, and this area has a major problem with stolen bags. There used to be, where they've extended London Bridge Station, there used to be a load of little bars down there. They're called skinkers and all this sort of weird names. Right. I had a friend of mine who got her bag nicked, and the police said, we don't come out for bag theft because it's not a serious crime. And I said, yes, but what you don't understand is the 100,000 bag thefts a year in this area, and not 100,000 different people, right? It's one gang or two or three gangs that are doing it all the time. If you arrested 10 people and properly investigated them, you would find that the bag thefts would go down. But they go, well, there's 100,000 bag thefts, and each one is not important enough to investigate.
I think what needs to happen is that a political party needs to come in and say, every time that the police just refuse to look into a crime, those police officers themselves will suffer something like the victim. They will have their bag taken.
Well, it's like in a riot.
They will have to get a new bank card.
Well, the police should be financially, like in a riot, the police force that is responsible for that area is responsible for paying out. So that should be the
That's a great idea.
From their salaries.
We launch a compensation scheme for bag theft, but the police pay out their own budget.
Then they will do something.
But they could easily have undercover police with bags.
They can't be
shut it. Exactly, they can't. Because it's normally only 2 or 3 people committing 90% of the crimes.
All right, so Lois McClatchy Miller, Dr. Callum Miller, thank you so much for coming in. We've had an absolutely amazing time. Real experts on this subject. If you're listening on Friday morning, Mike Graham is up next, and he's just about to come into the studio.
Good morning. Join me after the news.
Okay. Well, that happened after he was on.
Try and cut it in.
Okay. So obviously we're still on Thursday night here just for a couple of moments. Thank you so much to the two of you. Please do come again, because honestly, it's just so helpful to have people who've got so much knowledge. And obviously with you on the legal side and you on the medical side, it's just so helpful. You've got 30 seconds. Are you positive or negative, Lois, about the future?
I'm positive, because there's enough people who are hopeful for change, and if enough people are pushing for the right things, for family values, for ending crime, for reinstating women's rights, privacy and safety and dignity, then we can push.
Well, I was at the Brompton Oratory with 2,000 people on Easter. I think church attendance is going up.
It is.
Anyone's going to church, man. Get down to your local church.
Are you positive you've got 10 seconds?
I was going to say exactly the same. Every single person I know said.
Well, that's all we got time for.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Yes, this is The Late Show with Andre Walker and Asher Gould, and we've got our guest co-host just being mic'd up now, who is Lois Perry, not Lois McClatchy Miller. She has left the building, or she hasn't left the building. I think she's come back to try and grab her bag that she has forgotten. Anyway, what we should do...
We can't have two Loises in the same studio. It's
Don't walk in front of the camera.
It's going to destroy the Matrix.
Don't put your finger in front of the camera either. OK, we want your calls. 0344 499 1000. Let's go straight away to Cindy in Michigan. We're going to put your call straight through. And we've got a fair number of slots tonight. Cindy in Michigan, you're on Talk.
Hey, hi guys, how are you?
Howdy doody. That's American for hello.
Howdy doody. Ash, you look very, very smart tonight.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thank you,
yeah.
Well, come on.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about transgender, and I wish that the NHS would follow the new law that the Supreme Court, said.
Well, they should do legally. I mean, they're going to end up in a lot of trouble if they don't.
So the NHS, I mean, we believe in the abolition of the Supreme Court in this country because it's a ludicrous thing. Parliament is supreme in Britain. The Constitution is supreme in America. So why you have a Supreme Court in Britain is beyond me. We've only had it since Tony Blair bilged up the Constitution. Nonetheless, hospitals and indeed Lloyds Bank have said they would continue to discriminate against women on the issue of trans, despite the fact that the law has been confirmed by the Supreme Court.
How can they do that if the law says different? How can they?
Well, I think they'll get sued, if they do something like that.
See, what's different between the United States of America and Britain is that the Supreme Court in the United States of America will rule whether a law is constitutional. In the United Kingdom, remember, no law is being struck down, no law is being advantaged. The law already existed. The law said that women were a separate category to be protected. Therefore, all the Supreme Court is doing is confirming the facts.
Interesting. I think I need to come down there and take care of everything.
I think it will get overturned by the ECHR because obviously they're a Suprema Court to the Supreme Court, which is a ridiculous situation. Obviously shouldn't be, but we shouldn't have the Supreme Court.
Right. It's common sense. We all should know by now what a woman is.
And just a matter of interest, Cindy.
Yeah.
What's your view on Heriot-Watt University, who said in their midwifery course that when you take the lady's knickers off, she may still have a penis and testicles that haven't been removed yet? In a training midwife.
That would be a big shock, wouldn't it, to a midwife?
Ridiculous. Yeah, ridiculous. We all know what a woman... Yeah,
I mean, how's the baby going to come out? With that in the way, meat and two veg.
It's obscene though, isn't it? I mean, we can laugh about it, but women coming down saying, I want to smear. Sorry, a bloke coming saying, I want a smear test. Right? Can you not just? I mean, I don't want to be obscene.
Where do you smear?
No, that's what the bloke said. The bloke said, can you not just because I want to feel like a woman? Right, and
there are going to be men who are going to ask for that. I'm sure of it.
I mean, it's basically, can I just say it more politely? Basically, you've turned up at a hospital so you can ask a doctor to put a spoon up your bum for some sort of, Can
I just
It's a spatula, isn't it? A spatula.
Spoon up your bum during a spit.
Is it a little spatula?
No, that's the very point we're making.
Oh, right, but is this somebody that has actually had the procedure?
No, it's somebody walked in with a penis and testicles.
So it's not a spoon, you're telling us?
No, it's somebody walked in with a penis and testicles, Lois, and said, I want you to put... Because I want to feel like a woman.
Well, I don't know why having a spoon put up your bottom would make you feel like a woman.
OK, we did introduce Lois. Once again, gallery not listening.
Oh, my God, is Lois still there?
All right.
It's the other Lois. It's the Essex Lois, not the American Lois. Hello.
Heartland Trust.
Okay. I will repeat what I said earlier. We've got Lois Perry in the studio getting mic'd up. She's now been mic'd up. You can play it back if you want. And
she's for the benefit of the control room.
She's from the Heartland Institute. The gallery just not listening, Lois.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honour.
Great. Cindy?
Cindy?
Yes, Cindy's right here.
Go on, carry on.
I was waiting. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Lois, thank you for the work that you do for women's rights.
It's a different
No,
way.
I think of the one before. But anyway, what's going on in America? Because Trump's messing it all up. Is he becoming a bit less popular than before? What's going on down your streets?
No, you know what? I still back him. I still support what he's doing. I have faith. I think that, I don't know, the art of the deal is getting a little tested here.
He's not doing a good negotiation. He's basically offered Putin everything at the start. That's not how you do a deal.
It's not.
Have you read his book, The Art of the Deal? Has anyone read his book, The Art of the Deal?
Not in years.
So I would argue very much that Trump knows what he's doing, and that you know, and we're only seeing certain aspects of the negotiation. There's stuff that's been going on, possibly, but
Also, the
for a year
media
before
are
he
anti-Trump. They're all anti-Trump.
Yeah, they don't want it to work out.
We're only privy to so much. You know, we can't have all the
deals
details.
have different stages as well, and you need to be prepared to lose, to win. It's negotiations. He's not a globalist, and because he's not a globalist, he's upset the rest of the entire world.
But we don't want Vladimir Putin to have succeeded. Now, look, I've said quite openly, I do not believe that that Ukraine should reinvade Crimea. I think that would be a bloodbath as well. And I think that would be a major problem. But at the same time, we don't want somebody who just annexes another country. And by the way, this is the third or fourth annexation. Well, it's fourth. So let's go with Georgia, let's go with Transnistria, let's go with Crimea, and now with Luhansk and Donetsk. This is the fourth territory that he has annexed, Vladimir Putin, and we keep letting him away with it.
Crimea lost a while back, like during the Obama
2014, yeah. That's what they say when it started, and it's too late. It's like past the point.
That's long gone.
No, I think his first annexation was to take parts of Georgia in 2010. Then I think it was Transnistria and Moldova. Then it was Crimea, and now it's Luhansk. And what he'll try and do next, I don't think he'll be able to do it, is to, I don't know if you know, but Kaliningrad and Belarus are about 400 or 500 miles away from each other. He'll try and cut that off, which would cut off Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, and he would be able to annex the three.
But could it be that he's making it look as bad as possible, and then it will be better? I don't know.
It's Putin's art of the deal. He's starting off tough, isn't he?
Do we really trust Zelensky? I mean, as well. You know?
Well, I mean. So let's be clear on Zelensky. So Zelensky is a crook, but not as big a crook as Vladimir Putin. Mind you, Vladimir Putin will probably go down in history as the person who stole more from any taxpayer in any country than anybody else in history. We reckon he'll get up to 200 to 300 billion in the fullness of time in terms of the theft that he's made, which is a truly astonishing figure in terms of theft. Look, what Zelensky did was traded his own position for exonerating his boss from a bank heist. He probably didn't personally financially benefit from it. So those two are not in the same category. And even if they were, the invasion of a foreign country must not be tolerated.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Cindy.
And
thank you so much. Ken is in London. Ken, you're on talk.
Hi, Ken.
We'll never know what she...
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Hallelujah.
I agree with you, Ash. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.
Ken, before you go any further, I will tell you,
Happy Easter.
in the Brompton Oratory for Easter Midnight Mass, there were 2,000 people. I think that church attendance is increasing.
That's absolutely right. And Ken, I had a dream about you the other night.
What?
Yeah. Ken in London was in my dream. It was really weird.
With hundreds of Easter eggs.
Ken in London was also behind somebody the other day. Ken, you will often see there's a guy, I don't know what type of hat it is, a sort of bushman's hat with signs up saying Jesus is coming and all this sort of thing. Ken often says he's not a protester. He wants to just spread the word of the Lord. But Ken doesn't often look at a lot of these things on social media, but you do see him around the back. He was the one who famously said that Mick Lynch was acting on behalf of the Antichrist with his strikes.
Well, Ken just sort of popped up in my dream, and you
Tell us about this dream. So where were you? Where was it?
Well, I think it was probably because I'd watched a social media post. I think it was Trafalgar Square. Oh right, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then he just randomly was in my dream. I mean, the other people I randomly have dreamt about include the Queen.
But what
Nigel
did he do
Farage.
in your dream? I mean, did he have his Harrison Ford hat on?
He was talking to me about Jesus.
Maybe it actually happened.
No, I don't think it did actually happen. It was after Andre had sent me the social media clip.
Well, what did he say? Because this is important, because it was in a dream.
I think he just...
But it does show you, though, Ken, how this sort of street activism does work. Because
he infiltrated my bedroom at night.
But even though you're a Christian, the fact that I sent you the video of Ken got you thinking about Christianity. Ken, are you happy?
I'm glad that the dream was I was talking to the lady about Jesus. That's important. That's wonderful.
It was wonderful. It gave me a warm glow.
If you don't mind, I would like to talk about a very important subject, and I don't want to offend anyone. I'm speaking in love and concern, and I was sad to see the death of the Pope. Everybody's sad to see when somebody dies. But let's be honest here. I used to be a Roman Catholic. I had a wonderful Roman Catholic upbringing. I was an altar boy along with my brother. And when I was a wee boy, I used to believe the Catholic Church. There was no abuse. The teachers were all
not that they knew
nuns.
of.
The priests. There was no abuse. They were all. We were all treated with great respect. But what's happening today is the Pope Francis is being glorified. Now, this is idolatry, in my opinion. He was a very religious man, but he was not a genuine Christian. He didn't teach the Bible.
Well, he was also a globalist.
About these situations.
But hang on a second. Okay, Ken, let me ask you this question. So, I don't know if you saw earlier, but we had this debate about taking selfies with him. So I say that all flesh created by God is holy. Therefore, what you are doing at a grave, as an example, is merely memorialising the flesh created for your dead relative, but their body has left. Their soul has left the body. So, look, all you're doing is saying this is the corpse of a bloke, and we're going to give it some reverence as a result of it being created by God.
Well, if they reverence our bodies are wonderfully designed by God. But the situation with the Pope is that he propagated much anti-Christ doctrine. He didn't promote the teachings of Jesus and the apostles. If you just allow me to, I'm not trying to offend anybody.
No, go for it.
I just want to point out two or three false doctrines that people need to understand. The first one is the Roman Catholic Mass and the Eucharist. These are not taught anywhere in the Bible.
Correct.
The bread in communion doesn't change into the literal flesh and body of Jesus Christ. That's a lie. The wine does not change into the literal blood of Jesus Christ. This is lying doctrine.
But doesn't it say in the Bible that you should follow the way of venerating God that's based on your tribe in order to create cohesion within your tribe?
Yes.
No, we are
in fact, yes, it does.
loving him and obeying his word, Andre. That's
but it doesn't say say that. It says you have to obey the traditions of worship of your tribe.
No, not the Bible. The Bible says thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy strength, and all thy mind, and thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. The whole law of God is contained in those two commandments, Andre.
Well, the Bible is bigger than those two pages.
This is Easter time. It's still Easter. Well, not to just forget Easter and forget Jesus.
Yeah, stop forgetting Easter.
There's lots of good, sincere people believe that when they were christened as a baby, they became a Christian. Well, nowhere, that's a Catholic doctrine. Nowhere in the Bible was one baby christened. There's not one example in the Bible. Jesus never commanded it. The early church did not.
However, you've got to remember the reason that people were keen to baptise as early as possible was this ludicrous idea that before you were baptised, you'd go to hell automatically. Even if it wasn't your fault, you'd not been baptised yet.
Yeah, the whole concept of original sin.
The Roman Catholic Church teaches a place called limbo and a place called purgatory.
Well, I think that to be fair to the Roman Catholic Church, that was got rid of, wasn't it, at some point?
You've not been baptised yet.
Yeah, the whole concept of original sin.
The Roman Catholic
We appear to have a fault.
Back.
Let's go to a break and we're back in a moment.
Yeah.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, okay, we had a bit of a fault before, and I don't want to cut Ken off, so let's give Ken 2 minutes just to talk away about your subject, and then we're going to move on. Ken in London.
Verification station.
Oh.
Something's gone wrong here.
Listening to his radio. No, I think that's just him got his radio on. Let's go to Steve.
Okay, I'm slightly bemused by that. Let's go Steve in Walsall.
Hello, good evening, everybody.
All right, Steve. What's going on,
Steve.
man?
Good evening, Louise. As I've said before on the show, I've got quite a few years under my belt now, and I can make the comparisons then and now. The one comparison I can make is the police force.
Yes.
I can compare years ago when it was a police force. And the police force today is just something what's floating down the sewer. The same as the government.
Yeah, do you remember in the old days you used to have all the corrupt West Midlands crime squad? We knew where we were with them, didn't we?
Well, yeah, and if you was in a pub years ago, after time having a drink, there'd be a knock on the door, there'd be 3 coppers waiting outside for a pint. Them was the days.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that ties into this story that over a staggering over 2 million crimes went unsolved last year. That's over 5,700 crimes a day last year.
40% of all crimes reported went unsolved.
Only 7% resulted in any charges.
What is that about?
Basically, we're paying the police to delude ourselves into believing we're being protected.
Do you think that a lot of these crimes, though, maybe were like non-hate crime incidents?
No, because they're not the crimes. They're not crimes.
So you think that these are actual like
crimes.
burglaries?
Yeah.
And, right, okay.
Sexual offences, a lot of that doesn't get solved.
They don't even bother investigating.
The non-crime 8 is not even a crime. It shouldn't even be there, but yeah.
So Steve, we've got time for the non-crime hate instance, but we've got no time for actual crime.
Right. I mean, some years ago, I caught 2 chaps stealing my car, and I absolutely battered the crap out of them. And the police turned up, and they were going to arrest me for assault.
Ridiculous.
I said, hang on, let's get something straight. These 2 set about me because I tried to stop them stealing my vehicle.
No, that's wrong.
I got the better of them. And he said, well, think yourself, look, we're not doing you for GBH. I thought, well, that's the Biscuit.
Was he okay, the
No, but hang on a second.
Obviously not if it was GBH.
He's been attacked. He's been attacked. Now, look, at the end of the day,
he was stealing his car.
The fact that Steve is harder than the 2 scumbags, what they want you to do is they want you on the floor stabbed so they can go, knife crimes out of control.
I mean, the police didn't know you'd have got done for GBH. You would have gone to court and argued you were in fear of your life and it was reasonable force. So they say a lot of things. A lot of these people at the protests that they call far-right rights ended up in prison because they were advised to plead guilty by their ridiculous lawyers. And the couple that didn't plead guilty, they pled not guilty, they actually won their cases.
Oh, also, I'll tell you something. The standard of lawyers in this country is woeful. Can I tell you, I've had this big argument with my mate who's a taxi driver. We had a big problem. We sacked his lawyer. I represent him now. Honestly, the lawyer was crap.
He's got the wig and everything.
Andre
he looks
Walker,
great in it.
QC.
No, I'm not.
That could be like an American
I'm not
show.
joking. I'm not joking. The number of times when I've read court cases, and what you're doing is, I've got a friend of mine. And I won't tell you the full story, but I spoke to my mate, who's a lawyer who acts for some very, very senior people in this country, and he said to me, Andre, the big danger here is your mate's crap lawyer will have told him to do this, whereas actually he should do this. I phoned him up, and he said, my lawyer has advised me to do this.
Right, and he was right,
Yeah, whereas my mate went, here is the correct legal advice. No crime has taken place here. I don't want to comment. And that he said...
Did that shut it down?
And he said, that concludes my contribution. No, this guy had written 15 letters talking about this, just hung himself.
Oh, right.
He hadn't done anything wrong.
But like that woman that put her, the counsellor's wife, who, you know, she thought they'd be lenient with her and she was told if you plead
guilty.
Yeah, but she thought, well, she'll be out, she's been in remand, and then they come down with 3. Her lawyer, they should look at those cases again because they were badly represented, a lot of these
And then they won't
people.
let her have the special... There's a thing that she's eligible for where you can go home at the weekends. They won't let her
because
have
of media, they say she'll be a media, you know what I mean? They really are political prisoners.
What's really interesting is the number of people who've put out mean tweets who've got longer prison sentences than people who've raped children in Rotherham.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, 3 years. One bloke got 3 years. I mean, you know, that some of them did get less.
Steve, you made a point earlier, which I think is really, really important, where I think you have you have fear that all of our institutions now are acting against the public. Is that your view, and if so, why?
They are, yeah. I mean, the police force, there are some wonderful sections of the police force that do a wonderful job. But having said that, the general police force is a total waste of time, not because of the men who are in it, it's because of the idiots who are trying to run it.
Yes.
They couldn't run a pig down an entry.
Well, I slightly disagree with that, actually, because when I read the non-crime hate instance guidance at the College of Policing, I no longer believed that these were useless idiots. I thought that they, personally, from my knowledge of debating, public speaking, which is fairly significant given that I'm sat here doing this job, I would say to you that the people that wrote that at the College of Policing are malicious and know full well it's garbage that serves only one purpose, and that's to subjugate genuine free speech and political debate.
Yeah, they're not useful idiots.
It's combined with crap policing. You know, when you look at the police of the old days, they can't even catch criminals, they can't fight criminals. In the old days, you had ex-military people and they keep things straight.
Yeah, but it's only crap by the standards that we're setting, as Andre just said, that if they've got an ideological bent to what they're doing, then they're actually doing it well.
I got threatened. I'll tell you what,
some of them believe it.
I think they do. They're woke.
I got threatened by ACPO once.
What's ACPO?
The Association of Chief Police Officers.
Why are you always getting threatened by people?
It is a trade union. Oh, by the way, you know how it's illegal to have a police trade union? They don't observe that law. ACPO, not only is it a trade union for senior police officers, oh, by the way, they wrote to me and complained because I called them a trade union, done it 3 times now, but okay. But also they have genuine powers. So let me show you. I think I might have it. I don't know if I have, but you know, you have these press passes. On the back it says the National Chief Police Officers Council, which is basically ACPO, recognises you as a genuine news gatherer. Well, why is it the police? What's it got to do with it?
Yeah, and they're stopping people, you know, like Maya Tuzi, who don't have official because they're not in a press union. That's not the definition of a journalist.
Yeah, they go. That's what they do. They go. Sorry, go on, Steve.
Andre, I mean, them having so-called police officers, not actual police officers, community people walking around the streets now, etc. Now, I remember a few years ago, as you will, where they had officers doing the same thing. They were called specials.
Yeah.
And that was
hobby bobbies.
Disaster, because they'd got no authority. People were just taking...
Well, they had the same authority. No, they had the proper SP, special police, had exactly the same rights as proper police.
You wouldn't have known a... Hang on, Steve. You wouldn't have known a special constable was a volunteer because they would have had...
They had S on their lapels, but I mean...
I don't care what they've got on the lapels.
Well, they used to send it, but the PCSOs are the ones that don't have the powers.
I think we're struggling here. We're all talking over each other, aren't we? Steve, thank you so much. Let's go. I think you made the point.
Yeah.
Ken, we're going to have a third try. Come on. 2 minutes.
Good morning. Thanks for taking me back on. I appreciate that very much.
All right, man.
But this is a very serious matter we're talking about. We're talking here about the salvation of souls, because the Pope has now stepped into eternity. And one day you and I are going to die and step into eternity. If you die without the wrong faith, the wrong beliefs, we go to hell. So, for example, the Pope is very strong on praying the Rosary. I used to pray the Rosary, the 5 decades of the Rosary. But in the Rosary, it's a sin to pray to the dead. It's called necromancy. When you pray I used to pray to Mary. She was a blessed woman.
Yeah, but the Pope's going to get into heaven. You can't say the Pope won't get. That'd be ridiculous.
The Pope. What's that?
The Pope will get into heaven, won't he? There's no question.
I believe the Pope is in hell. Actually, he wasn't a born-again Christian.
But was he the actual proper
Pope?
You
can't say that. I mean, you can't say the Pope. He wouldn't even be questioned. He'd be let in.
He's not even the real Pope anyway, because the other Pope hadn't actually died yet.
Yeah, how can you say that, Ken? I mean, that's maybe your belief, but I mean, you're saying the Pope wouldn't get into heaven.
No, Jesus said it. Unless a man is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God.
Ken, we've been through this multiple times, right? Jesus says. No, hang on a second. Jesus says you will not get into heaven unless you are born again. Just because your organisation adopted the name Born Again Christians doesn't mean that's what he was talking about. So what happens is Jesus says it, right? 2,000 years later, a group of people say our organisation is called the Born Again Christians. It's not the same thing.
It's passing off.
We've done this multiple times, Ken.
Okay, well, let's not talk about that all day. We've talked about it before. You're entitled to your opinion. But
by the way, I will say one thing. It did make me laugh when the Reverend Ian Paisley, when Pope John Paul I died, they said to him, "What do you think's happened?" He went, "The robed sinner of Rome has been returned to hell." Oh, you old softy. Oh, you old softy. But Ken, on a serious note, on a serious note,
Andre,
sorry, go on.
Andre, there's lots of genuine, sincere Roman Catholic people. I'm not talking about the people. We're talking about your belief, your system, what you believe.
Well, Andre's Roman Catholic.
So let me just explain this briefly, very briefly. When I was a Roman Catholic, I was taught to pray to Mary and given the decades of the rosary beads. And that what I was actually doing was I was giving unto Mary the attributes of God. His omniscience.
No. She acts as an intermediary. You say, "Hail Mary, full of grace, pray for me," and then you list what you want her to pray for. You're not praying to her. You're not idolatrizing her. You're asking her to act as an intermediary.
No. You're praying, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Pray for me."
Hail Mary,
no, hang on a second. But you've just made that point.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with me.
Yeah, but we're not to
with thee. Blessed art thou amongst virgins, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and in the hour of our death. Sorry, you're wrong.
Ken, you've been biffed. You're off. You're off. No, Ken, you're off. I'll tell you why. Because there is no doubt. There is no doubt. No, Ken, there is no doubt in that prayer that you do not pray to Mary. You ask her to pray for you.
Pray for us.
You're not letting me explain it.
Go on, explain it, Ken. Go on, let's see.
Let me explain it. When you pray to Mary, you're praying to the dead.
No, you're not.
We're only to pray to God.
No, you're not.
Mary's dead. She's now in heaven. She doesn't know English. She doesn't know German. She doesn't know every language on earth.
She doesn't know English. She doesn't know German. What on earth are you talking about?
Let me explain it.
She's listening to your soul. Your soul is speaking to her and asking for her to act on your behalf. You're totally wrong.
Give Ken a minute, because we did promise. Ken, you've got a minute.
Come on, give me a minute to explain this. When you pray to Mary, you're praying to a dead person. She's in heaven now with God. She's blessed. But she was only a woman. She was a sinner like us. She rejoiced in God, her Saviour. Now, when I prayed to Mary, I believe she was around me. She's omnipresent. I believe she was all-powerful. I believe she was a mediator to God. This is all contrary to the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Church and the Bible. Only God
What do you think Jesus would think about the way you're talking about?
Let him finish.
You're breaking in. Only God is omniscient, omnipresent, and all-powerful. But when you pray to Mary, you believe she can hear you. She knows your language. She can hear every language on earth at the same time and hear all the prayers. That is nonsense. Only God has the power to understand everyone speaking to him at the same time and all in different languages. Mary only spoke Hebrew or Aramaic. She was only a woman.
Okay, Ken, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm going to rule on this case, and I think the words "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now" means you're not praying to her. It means you're requesting. Okay, let's go to a break. We're back in a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I'll be honest with you, Lois.
What?
I think that was good theological knowledge there.
Well, thank you.
Very good, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, let's get off Jesus for now.
Yeah.
Gemma is in Devon. Gemma, you're on Talk.
Hello, yeah. Right, I don't know where to start with this one, to be honest with you. I've put my views over on how I feel about trans in sports because I don't think they should be in there. Any of us should be in it.
Yeah.
Because we are stronger. We are, capable of doing a lot.
Are you, Gemma, are you, do I take from what you said that you are a trans woman?
Yes, I am a trans woman. I didn't want to say that because I don't want to offend anyone. So I'm glad you said it.
No, it's just when you said we shouldn't be in women's sports or whatever it was you said.
Yeah, no, I am a
You can
trans
tell
woman.
his name's Gemma, so.
Yeah, and then when I go into I've had a few hospital appointments over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
When I go in, I don't expect for the nurses and all that to how can I put it? I have to tell them that I'm trans, so they don't expect to find you understand?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Have you had any operations or things like that?
Clearly.
Everything's gone. I've got nothing dangling between my legs or anything. Yeah, that's all gone.
And are you happy with that?
I am happy with that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's important. Can I ask you one question, Gemma, that upsets me? Right. So, first of all, the Supreme Court made very, very clear that your rights ought to be observed in things like employment, in things like, if you want to go into a pub or whatever. It's just these single-sex women's spaces, that's all. And it's only because, I've got to be honest with you, I would allow you into a woman's changing rooms because I think the operation is important, but not women's sports because of the physical ability.
No, I agree with you on that. I really do agree with you on that. Now, as it goes to toilets, this is for my own preservation as well as women's preservations, yeah? I try and use the disabled toilets where I can.
Right.
But sometimes I can't get into them because they're locked. Yeah,
I know Julia Hartley-Brewer disagrees with this, but I think if you've had your male genitals removed, I'm not so bothered about you going into women's changing rooms.
Can I just say, as a woman that was born a woman, I share the same view as you.
Why?
Because
male
it's
genitals
not
can be
somebody,
intimidating.
Yeah, but it's not somebody that's woken up one morning and self-identified and wants to go in a little girl's changing room. It's somebody that's committed.
Yeah.
It's not like a sexual thing. If you
they've gone through 2 years. Yeah. They've had to have psychiatrists sign it off. They've had to live as a woman for a year to have had the operation. There's a proper procedure.
I would go more simply than that. I think there are 2 issues. I think number 1, women don't want to see men's private parts in the changing room, and point number 2, you can't rape anyone unless you've got a penis.
No, that's absolutely
well, you can
right.
actually. You can now.
Well, Harvey Weinstein tongue raped.
Well, yeah, you can rape.
Okay, sorry.
But do other women feel the same as you? Some don't, like Julia doesn't. I mean,
no, I think.
So shouldn't you just?
I think personally, they're taking a very hard line.
Sorry, Gemma, give us a second. Gemma, we're back to you now. Go on. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, the point I want to bring across right now, the court ruling says that you've got to go into what you're assigned at birth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what happens if a trans man goes into a female toilet, okay, and he's in there because he's a biological woman, okay, and he's got full beard, everything, okay, then the women come out and see him, okay, but I think it's left it open for men to be able to go into women's toilets and say, I'm a trans man.
Yeah,
yeah.
You can normally tell.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
Gemma, I'm inclined to agree with you because I know that you can get these pump-up penises. By the way, I will say
they
one
don't.
thing.
They're just big clitorises. They're not proper.
No. You can get like a rubber one.
That's not a penis,
No, I'm not joking.
You can go in with a rolling pin.
They used to advertise those on the back of Razzle.
I'm not being funny. Hey, we've all had a few drinks, lads. The balls are like, do you know those Reebok pumps?
No, I don't.
Pump it up.
I don't know, actually, no.
One of the balls are a pump, and they
That's
pump
right.
the penis up. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I knew a disabled guy who had a pump,
I've
and you
never
press
known
a button,
anyone that needs a
and you
pump.
get immediate. Anyway,
All right,
we better move
Gemma,
on.
I have to say, and people are going to accuse me of being woke, I'm inclined to agree with you on that. But anyway, great. Well, let's move on. And Grace is in London. Grace, you can pump up on the balls.
I think we just got away with it. Grace.
Hi. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that part of anatomy, so we'll move on. But following on from what Ken said, I would concur that some of the things that the Pope stood for are, in my understanding, not really biblical.
Is that the woke stuff? The way that he was saying that trans people don't go to hell? Well, sorry, gay people don't go to. I don't know what he said, but whatever it was.
Well, that's a bit complicated. I mean, what he said was, if a gay person is, seeking God, then who is he, the Pope, to judge? And I would think that's not a wrong thing for the Pope to have said.
But it's also, Grace, a cop out, isn't it?
It is,
because he's not said whether it's good or bad. He said it's not. It's between you and God to judge. And I have to say, I strongly believe that we do make this mistake of far too often saying, I'm going to tell you what's right and wrong, whereas actually all you can do is give people guidance and say it's between you and your maker.
But they watered it down, didn't they? If I'm not wrong, the Catholic Church in the 50s or 60s, and they said, and also more recently they said you can use condoms, and they have watered it down.
There'd be no men in the Catholic Church if there wasn't homosexuals.
The most important thing.
That is not great.
Well, Peter Tatchell said when he went to Vatican City, he said he'd never seen more gay men apart from a pride march.
I must admit, when I went to the Brompton Oratory, there was one priest who. But the reality is, you've got to remember, it's not against the rules to be a homosexual. It's against the rules to break the celibacy.
Well, within the Catholic Church, they have a rule about celibacy that was instituted, so far as I understand, by a previous pope, and that's not a biblical rule.
No, it isn't.
I mean,
once the cassock comes off.
There are several things about Catholicism that I would disagree with, as Ken suggested. But I wouldn't go around saying that the Pope is in hell, because I don't think we really know. I think that
What's your instinct?
I don't feel I look closely enough at all of the different things that he said.
But aren't you not allowed to judge as Catholics? You're not allowed to decide whether
she's not Catholic.
Whatever religion, you're not allowed to judge, are you?
Well, you can have an opinion on things. It's not up to us ultimately to make the decision. When Jesus tells us not to judge, but he also tells us to judge correctly. So I think he's not.
Well, you can't do both, can you?
Well,
I can if you're the Son of God.
Well, he can.
I think that what Jesus is saying is that we really need to not be judgmental about other people. We need to be reflecting on our own sin rather than on other people's. The Pope should be, rather than telling a gay person all about sexuality, he should prioritise telling a gay person or anyone else to look to Jesus, because that's the most important thing. It absolutely is the case that we should follow God's guidance on sexual relationships, and God does prohibit.
Well, what do you think? What do you think about something that I saw, which might be a bit crass and offensive to some people, but you understand the feeling behind it? I saw a bumper sticker which said, "Dear God, please save us from your followers." And I guess what that means is that the number of people who are with sin but cast the first stone anyway is just remarkable.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who label themselves as Christians but aren't necessarily really in their hearts and minds committed to trying to follow Jesus, and some of those people act in ways that are very un-Christ-like, and so I presume that the bumper sticker might have been referring to that.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't about the more thoughtful and sensible people, as Lois's phone goes off.
The rules are you have to now read the message out on live on the radio and TV. What the message, please, Lois?
No. Does that answer your question?
Grace, just ask. Let me quickly ask about your religious background, just to give it context to people. What I always say, by the way, is because you're a phone caller, not a contributor, you don't have to answer anything, but it might be just interesting.
Well, I don't know how much you want me to say. I was taken to church growing up, but I increasingly thought that I don't actually believe in any of this. I'm a very kind of non-spiritual person instinctively. But then when I was in high school and I was studying biology, I just came to feel actually the complexity of these biochemical processes does suggest to me there could actually be a designer. It just seems to make sense.
I've heard that before.
And then as I studied science further, I found that there are various things about the parameters necessary for the universe to sustain life, as well as about biochemistry being interdependent in so many ways, that mean we couldn't really exist without that.
Grace, can I ask you something which would be deeply deep heresy for a lot of people, but there is no doubt now that you could create a computer simulated Big Bang within a computer, right? And you could start to set the parameters for the universe. Is there anything I've asked people this before, is there anything within the Bible or Christian teachings that prohibits God being somebody who turned on a computer simulation?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that, because a computer is a thing.
Was Jesus a video game?
Created.
This is all so blasphemous.
But what bit of the Bible tells you that it can't be a computer? God said, "Let there be light." You know what?
Are you going to get up here like a Monty Python and start going Jehovah, Jehovah?
Could be Donkey Kong.
I do think that you could perhaps align God saying "Let there be light" with the Big Bang. I think those could be different ways of describing the same event. And I think it's really important that we make it clear that belief in God. The
point I'm making is this. If we are sat now in a computer simulation, it would explain a great deal about there being a creator, about there being a starting point, about when you die your soul gets, because it could be moved into the recycle bin.
Into the hard drive,
This is
I guess
vile.
it kind of, you could argue that it's violating Occam's razor.
Okay.
Don't know.
What does that mean?
I know Gillette.
Occam's razor. You can look it up. It's the idea that the simplest explanation is probably more plausible than a more complicated explanation.
Yeah.
So to suggest that somehow God has a giant computer is kind of overcomplicating.
But then that could be a metaphor. The computer could itself.
But hang on a second. It does mean if we are in a simulation,
like the Matrix.
It does mean that I will definitely see my mother in the next life, because it will definitely exist.
But you will definitely see your mother in the next life.
No. But I'm pointing out if that is the explanation of God.
But she'd be on an Atari ST, and you'll be on like
Your mother's taking a Mega Drive.
All right, Grace. Thank you so much. By the way, I knew my mate Steve would get in touch with this. You know, after you've had a few drinks, I'd love that pump-up knob. Superb.
God.
On yourself, not on somebody.
Is there any chance that we could discuss something to do with net zero?
Yeah, we are going to discuss some things with those when we come straight back.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Okay, somebody has said, Andre, you've cracked it, and can we say the name of a famous politician is the computer virus? But anyway, we're not going to say which politician it is because it's during the election.
The robotic one.
By the way, yeah, the one that's not very good. So that was Jimmy Savile. So,
Jingle, jangle. Oh, I don't want to talk about Jimmy Savile.
Can't joke about him anymore.
Jewelry. Okay.
No.
So okay. I just want to say to you, in the last couple of minutes of the show, we've got about 15 minutes left, or about 12 minutes left, just to say that James Whale is on holiday this week, and so me and Asha are back tomorrow night, so we're looking forward to that. Also looking forward to James taking a bit of time off, because I'll tell you what, throughout his illness, he hasn't taken much off, has he?
No, he was really good last week, and he'll be back, don't worry. But anyway, look.
Chip Lad has sent
Chip Lad, the Panasonic is flashing. We've got a message. Chip Lad, take it away, Chip Lad.
I was watching Celebrity Big Brother earlier on tonight, right? This is Jojo saying she don't like straight men. She said it twice. Or if I turn that round and say I didn't like gay people, I'll never get away with it. So should I apologise for being straight men? No, I don't think so. She didn't mention straight women. She just didn't like straight men. Unbelievable.
I mean, if you said you didn't like gay men, that would be, you get done seriously. So
I just wondered. So Michael Fabricant was in, wasn't he? Yeah. And I was just wondering, are there any cameras in the toilets at Celebrity People?
No, not in the celebrity one. No. In the non-celebrity one there are, but not.
There's no
conservatives that are.
No, there's no cameras in the toilets.
Celebrities don't go to the toilet.
All I will say is there's no smoked fish without fire.
I've got to say one thing to you. There's so many times when I just want to say, hey, by the way, but we can't.
Thanks, Chip Lad.
We can't. Carol is in Manchester. Carol, you're on Talk.
Oh, good evening to you.
Morning.
Enjoyed it. Let there be light.
And there was.
I think with the Catholic, I always think, let there be light. Such a difficult day. I get up in the morning and think, thank God that there is light. I'm breathing and whatever. So
it is good news when you wake up and you can breathe.
My dad always said that they said that prostitution was the oldest profession, but given that God had said, let there be light, and there was, presumably an electrician was the oldest profession.
That's such a dad joke.
He was the chairman of the Electrical Contractors Association.
That's brilliant.
But surely the oldest profession is the pimp, because then he went out and...
Well, no, not all women have a pimp.
No, that's true.
Anyway, I'm going to go from that. Anyway, regarding about trans women, trans men, it's simple. That's all it is.
Yeah, but Carol, what about that idea? What about that idea that somebody's got... admittedly a penis that it's been fashioned from this or fashioned with that. I mean, Gemma made a fair point.
And I think a lot of people, at the end of the day, when it came out regarding about gay, and it was awful, people are the way that they are at the end of the day. And I think it's a small majority of people that are on streets, are doing what they do, going London, going Manchester, going whatever, just causing trouble for the real people.
I think she's
right. And real people, at the end of the day, can I just say this, is trans women, trans men, a woman and a man. I mean, my God, we've got a Prime Minister who looks absolutely bloody stupid. That's all I can say. I'm getting up. I'm 64 years of age, and I'm thinking, my God, what else can you give me before I die? It's absolutely ridiculous to say.
Are you reassured now that somebody who's a biological man who's had no alterations will not be on your ward if you're ill?
If there was somebody that came up, right, and asked me, like at the end of the day, and was a trans woman that came up and said, like anything, like a man. If a man came up, if they said, I'm a trans woman, are you okay to get undressed or whatever? If I want to say no, I'll say no. If it's a man who came up regarding as a nurse, a doctor, Are you okay to go? If I want to say no, I will say no.
Yeah, but for a while, there were people claiming that. I mean, I gave an example earlier. I don't know how much of the show you watch, Carol, but there was a women's football team where a man, trans woman, a man. Kicked a football. Hang on a second. Kicked a football that hard at a woman that it destroyed her knee. When other hang on a second. When other women's football teams didn't want to play against this guy, they had to pay. Hang on a second. Give me a second. Right. So when this bloke smashed the ball at a woman's knee and it blew to pieces, then. When other women's teams refused to play against it, the Football Association enforced fines against the women's teams.
Really? Yeah. Can I give you a statistic from our mutual friend?
Man's
the psychiatrist.
And a trans women sport.
No, that's right. Can I just interject, Carol, just briefly, just to say...
1 minute. Just please. I've been in sport with my kids all my life and everything. I've had my girls right with it, who've come in, played football when they're younger or whatever. They have women, men, what you call it, with it. Over the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's got worse. Yeah. There's no way that any trans man, here we go, any trans woman, they should have their own area.
Okay, Carol, thank you so much. You wanted to comment?
I just wanted to say, a mutual friend of ours who's a consultant psychiatrist, it's Dr. Kashani. He said that over
by the way, Dr. Kashani is called Dr. Qureshi.
Qureshi, that's what I meant. Sorry, Dr. Qureshi.
Yeah, Dr. Kashani is something totally different.
I apologise.
He's not qualified.
My pronunciation was wrong. Okay, Dr. Qureshi said that over 2/3 of trans women in prison are sex offences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much more than straight men. It's like 58%, and in men, because I saw that today, I think Sharon Davis tweeted out, it's like 7 or 10% of men, 57% of trans.
I always worry about that statistic, and I explain why I worry about that statistic. Because when Ian Huntley, now we don't know about Soane, but presumably it was a sex crime, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Yeah. He wasn't convicted of that, but one would assume it's a sex crime. What worries me is that I think it's the people self-defining. See, I don't think they're genuinely trans. Ian Huntley wants to go to a women's prison.
Did he?
Yes.
Right.
But he hadn't grown his hair, he wasn't wearing a frock, he just said, I'm a woman.
Well, like the one in Scotland that Jimmy Cranky.
So you're saying that they've decided to become a woman after they've committed a sex crime?
Yeah, just to blag it.
Have they been moved out of these female prisons now? I mean,
no, they're not allowed to be in there anymore.
Oh, well, that's good.
But with the ruling the other day, they were still before that ruling, so hopefully they've already moved.
Okay, thanks, Carol. We've got one last person. You're going to be pleased. It's Tristan in Southend.
Oh, hello, Tristan.
Hi, Lois. How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm really well. He's a big fan of mine, and I'm a big fan of his.
Oh, thank you. I've been promoting the show all evening.
I know you have, and he's from Westcliff, aren't you, where I'm from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we share a neighbourhood in the past, don't we? So you've moved on now. Yeah, so, Andre, you mentioned about my epilepsy and blindness earlier on.
Yes.
Well, the epilepsy tablets were great for 10 days until they made me suicidal and I had to stop taking them.
Oh, no!
So that was a bit of a nightmare. But
So just to recap for everybody, because not everyone's watched the whole show, you were epileptic, you had a big fall and it made you blind. Then you told me the epileptic pills were brilliant. I knew there'd been an incident, but I didn't know the pills had sent you funny.
Yeah, that's what went on. I'm back to my usual happy self now, as I'm sure.
Well, that's good.
Have you ever looked into, because I remember for kids with epilepsy, they said this cannabis oil really saved lives, it stopped kids, and they try. Have you looked into that sort of medication?
I have.
Trust you.
Yeah.
No, but kids are, because it's being refused, even though it's been legal, kids are going convulsing, going into seizures, and they're dying in intensive care. When this really cuts down the seizures.
To be fair.
Yeah, absolutely right, Ash. But for me, it's not my thing, to be honest. I'll stick with the stuff that's prescribed, to be honest.
No, it was prescribed.
No, but I think Ash is talking about medical cannabis.
Well, okay, we've not got long. We've only got a minute and a half, Tristan, so I'm going to let you talk. Go for it.
Okay. Yep, so I just want to say thank you to Peter Barnes and James Bembridge from That Was the Woke That Was, because when I was feeling like that, I kid you not, while a lot of people weren't there who should have been, they both inboxed their phone numbers in case they needed a chat.
Oh, that's very kind.
So did you take to social media or something? Because I didn't see anything.
No.
Yeah, I put it on there just to say I wasn't feeling myself.
Yeah, James Benbridge is absolutely lovely.
Amazing.
Although that story about when he was forced to eat a fox is just not...
Yeah,
no, he does get himself in these weird and wonderful situations. Genuinely,
was it tasty?
Yeah.
He said it was vile.
So Tristan, the search for a really effective cure for your epilepsy continues.
Yep.
Huge disappointment for me, I have to say.
Yeah, we'll get there. Trust me, and I'll see again because they'll be able to grow me new eyes in a petri dish from my DNA. I'm convinced of that.
I'm convinced of that too.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm convinced of that too. All right, Tristan, thank you so much. So thank you to everyone who